a Superman action figure in a toy coffin, a blue shirt and red jacket, a first flight in the sun above the Arctic tundra. These are some of the moments that define my Superman fandom. Together on this podcast, we journey across time and media to examine, discover, and reconsider the creative visions that have shaped the Man of Steel. Welcome to Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. I'm your host, Anthony Desiato. Joining me to discuss Superman in the Bronze Age is first-time guest, Bernie Gerstmayr. Welcome, sir.
Hello. Thanks for having me, man.
My pleasure. Let's talk real quick about how you and I met. It's a comic shop connection. So you and I met at a shop that's local to me, Aw Yeah Comics in Harrison, New York. But you know Aw Yeah from their Skokie, Illinois location, yes?
Yeah, and the Skokie, Illinois location was kind of like the flagship store that then Mark, the owner, moved out and opened the Harrison store. And then we were in because my family's from the East Coast, and we were visiting Mark and the store. And then I think you were with your wife shooting some footage or talking through or just visiting. But yeah, that's how we met. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we've kept in touch and shared our mutual love of Superman and that we're here to do this now. Yeah. And, you know, for anyone who's watching the video version on YouTube, you can see this. But for those who can't, not only are you wearing your Superman shirt, but behind you, over your shoulder, is a poster of, would you describe it for us?
So this is our Death of Superman poster. This came out in 1993, late 93, and this was the funeral for a friend. I think it's one of the covers, actually. But this is one of the first pieces of Superman like memorabilia that I ever bought. So I got it just out of, I graduated high school in 94, and that was what I brought to college with me. So
I love that you still have it. That's still the original?
That is the original. Yeah.
Yeah. I love that. I know, and any regular listeners know, the Death of Superman holds a very special place for me. So I'm happy to, as much as I'll be looking at you, I'm happy that if my gaze drifts, that it's
lands. Okay. I know you'll be looking at Booster's glorious hair and Nightwing's old school costume. Yeah, I know.
Yes. Now, a lot of guests do like to enjoy a cocktail while we do these episodes. What do you have with you tonight?
I am doing a little bit of Bullet rye whiskey with a little bit of Coke in there. It's about 2 fingers of bourbon, and I started just straight because I was thinking about Nevermore, and then I thought, I'll sweeten the pot so it's not so bitter. So
very nice. So I have bourbon as well. I have nice. This is something different that I tried. I rarely, actually never go for anything based on the name alone. Okay. But I was at the liquor store to restock, and I came across something that I just couldn't pass up. It's called Puncher's Chance. And in addition to my love of Superman, I'm a massive Rocky fan. And the idea of the Puncher's Chance, that you can be outclassed, outmatched, you can be losing, but all you need to do is land that one punch.
One hit.
Puncher always has a chance. So I saw that and I was like, this is for me. And I have to say,
okay,
this does not supplant Maker's Mark or Wild Turkey. Those remain my top picks, but it's quite good, and I do enjoy it. So cheers, sir.
Cheers. Yeah, we bounce back and forth between countries and states. We do Jameson, we do Bullet, we do Tell 'Em We're Due. We bounce quite a bit around. This last one was, my wife said, get whatever's cheapest. So that's the way we went. So,
well, sometimes that's what it comes down to, but it's all good. So this is the final concluding chapter in our pre-crisis trilogy. We've covered Superman in the Golden Age, the Silver Age, and here we are now in the Bronze Age, a period of time typically considered 1970 to 1985, right up until Crisis on Infinite Earths. And just as we've done in the previous episodes, we'll talk about the era as a whole, our overall impressions, what the major themes and plot points and things like that were. But then we'll also drill down on some specific stories. And just to give a quick overview of some of the stories that we're going to be talking about, we'll be talking about Denny O'Neil's Kryptonite Nevermore, which is considered by most to be the official kickoff of the Bronze Age for Superman. We'll also be talking about Must There Be a Superman? For the Man Who Has Everything, Superman Takes a Wife, and a few others. As with the previous episodes, I sourced my reading material from a few places. I have the Superman in the 70s and 80s trade paperbacks, which were very helpful. And as with the previous decades, they have sort of introductory material and connective tissue to give you a little bit of context for the era as a whole, which is very helpful. Yeah. And I also have the 75-year and 85-year hardcovers, which were helpful. But those cover such a wide range that it's only like 2 or 3 Bronze Age stories.
Yeah.
And then to a very limited extent, I use the DC app. And I say limited because the offerings there are real spotty. So I didn't have, a vast library of Bronze Age stories to pull from, but I worked with what I had.
Yeah. I surprisingly enough did not have the Superman in the 80s trade. I had to look it up in the library system and get it sent to our library so I could have it for the month. Because, it's really tough to find. And that's a very rare print, too. But I did, for whatever reason, I think I got it on an live sale. It was Superman in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He did a lot of those trades, but it didn't come with the 80s. I actually cracked out my original for The Man Who Has Everything, annual 11. And it was kind of fun to read it. It was still in really nice shape, so I was just kind of sitting. I first went outside like an idiot. And then I was like, oh, no, it's too windy for this to be outside. So I enjoyed I'll tell you, man, for the listeners, I by trade, I'm a teacher. So I'm very used to putting together a presentation with notes and copious feedback. So my wife is laughing at me laying in bed and I'm reading and I have my phone and I'm like, I read a few pages and I'm making notes. She's like, wow, you're really you're doing your homework for this podcast.
I admire it. I appreciate it. And, you join a growing line of teachers who have been on the podcast. I haven't been keeping a running tally, but it's I was thinking about you being a teacher. And I'm we've had a bunch between this show and the book club podcast. And all of the guests, teacher or not, have been wonderful. But the teachers in particular, I feel do come with the most notes. Which I get. I mean, it's fantastic. And yes, you did send me a photo.
I might be your first music teacher. I might be the first one you've had.
Yes.
And I get the rare joy of playing the music that we all know, all the scores and the film scores, and actually sharing that with students. I've got an awesome arrangement of the original Superman suite that has, the March of the Villains, the Krypton theme, and all that stuff. So my students, it's surprising how much they still know it. So it's cool.
That's awesome. So of course, we'll dive into Bronze Age, but the show is called Digging for Kryptonite, a Superman fan journey. And often I like to get a little bit of a sense of what the guest's Superman fan journey is. And I know a little bit because you and I, we zoomed off camera a little while back, and you filled me in on a little bit. So, if you wouldn't mind kind of laying this out for our audience, how did you get into Superman? I know we already touched on it when we talked about the poster, but how'd you get into Superman? And then what happened after that entry point?
I actually have 2 entry points, which is kind of weird. So I was born in 1976. So I guess around 1982, when I was 6, my dad would take me to the hardware store and he'd go look for what he needed. And there was one comic spinner in the store. So we grew up in New Jersey, just about 20 minutes from Manhattan. So we were right on the edge of New York State in Tappan, New York. And I got to pick out one comic. And my first comic I ever got from my dad was DC Comics Presents Superman and the Doom Patrol. And I have it on my wall as the first piece of Superman that I know, and it's from the Bronze Age. It's from the so it's in 1982. I now since have completed the entire DC Comics Presents line, which is hard to find also, but awesome, fun reads, which we can touch on a little bit towards the end. But that was my first entry point. My dad was really doing me a solid as a kid. Just went, hey, go look at the comics while I go get what we need. And that's what I pulled and learned about the Doom Patrol and Robot Man and Negative Woman and all that kind of stuff. So it was really, really cool. And my second entry point was after being kind of away from comics for about maybe age 9 to 17, I went to college. Vintage Phoenix Comics in Bloomington, Indiana was the next entry point where that's where I really started collecting again. The death of Superman had just happened. Funeral of a Friend had gone through 94. I had that cool poster I brought to college. I still loved Superman. And then I basically found all of the back issues from Death on until 95. And then I started dating my now wife, and our dates on weekends every now and then were to scour the Indiana countryside for comic book shops and to fill in as close as I could, of the Bronze Age and all around it. So right now, I've got from 1975 to the present, pretty much every Superman comic that's ever come out. So
that is amazing. I mean, that's ultimately why I was going to have you on for some episode because, I enjoyed our chats and I know you're a Superman fan, but the reason you're here for this is the fact that you collected backwards into the Bronze Age. And, that's no small collecting feat. And I want to ask you about it in a second, but I admire what you did. It's so odd to me about myself, and I'll probably talk about this more. I have a run of episodes coming up in September and October about the Byrne and post-Byrne and pre-Death of Superman and Death of Superman era, that whole period.
Yeah.
But what's so weird to me is that, as everyone knows at this point, I started with Death of Superman. I never went back. And I was no stranger to back issue hunts. I mean, I got into Spider-Man by way of the Clone Saga, the 94-95 storyline. And I collected the Clone Saga almost entirely as back issues. So I got 2 years worth of 4 Spider-Man titles. So again, I was no stranger to a back issue hunt. And, every now and then I would pick up an older Superman comic. But I mean, we're talking maybe a dozen at most. I never did a full hunt and put together the years leading up to Death of Superman. And I couldn't really tell you why, but I'm excited to finally delve into this stuff now. But I so admire what you did, and I would imagine that there are collectors listening to this who would be curious to know this as well. I mean, how did you go about compiling all this stuff? And how hard was it, I guess, is the bigger question.
Yeah, that's where it gets kind of weird. So I'd say, I'm 44 now, and I'm about to send off my oldest to college. So now spending is a little, let's just say, tighter. But, we all have, at a certain extent, that amount of disposable income, right? So I'd be going to shows since college. So whether it be Wizard World or, random small shows, and my butt would go right to the 50-cent boxes. So, my wife, I love her, but she'd be like, "You have a great day. I'm going to stay home and not do that." And so we would, me and a few friends, or I would just dig into 50-cent boxes, and I have my spreadsheet of kind of what at that point I had a paper, folded in my pocket, when it started small. Then it turned into a note on my phone. Then it turned into a Google sheet. Now it's tabbed with ages and all different sections, but. It took, really just up to last year, Anthony, was when I completed up to 1976. So it's taken 20 years, to get to that point.
It's amazing. Do you have any, we won't have your wife listen to this. Do you have any plans to go back even further? Or is 76 a good
I already told her 76. So 76 was the goal. So it's actually really weird because June of 1976 is Superman 300. Okay. So it's kind of like a cool landmark issue, which was really hard to find. And I'm really cheap. So I went through all of this and I kind of didn't want to spend more than $5 on a comic, which once you get, and especially now as you're going into early 80s and 70s, the older I got, the more I realized, these comics are getting older now and harder to find and more expensive. So funny story is today, I went to Graham Cracker Comics because they had a big 50% off sale at all their branches. So I spent an hour and a half at a store this morning and finding a few old ones as early as 1970. I think I brought something home from the 70s. So
that's very cool. I don't know what I'll end up doing because, and we'll get into this, but overall, I enjoyed the Bronze Age reading experience. And,
Yeah.
Bronze obviously is more attainable than silver or golden. So there's a chance that I might embark on some form of back issue hunt if I decide to revisit the Bronze Age in the future. Because again, like I said, and not to harp on this, but I've now done 3 episodes in a row, and it's gotten exceedingly difficult, increasingly difficult.
Yeah.
Golden was actually the easiest. Because DC has put out a number of omnibus editions, and their app is actually, they have the first 100 issues of Action Comics up there. So that thankfully wasn't that bad. But then it gets real spotty after that. And yeah, again, silver and bronze were real tough to source. So, yeah, I don't know. I might have not quite as expansive a back issue hunt as you did, but I might have something. I might have something in me. We'll see.
Yeah. And you know what? I would start with a run or a title or like a year, maybe. Like, do a little bit of research and just start small. Like, say, like, you know what? Maybe I really want, like, DC Comics Presents, for example. It's about 80 issues, something like that. It's really cool to see the different artists they brought in through that entire series, as well as writers. And they used that for some young talent in that time too. And it was cool having Superman paired with a different character from the DC universe for each issue. And also, random trivia fact for people out there, the first appearance of He-Man actually happened in DC Comics Presents, and I think I have it here. But yeah, like, I searched for that one. That's a very hard issue to find because they did a crossover between that and what was then Star Comics. It wasn't even owned by Marvel yet. So DC Comics Presents is a fun thing to, like, especially for covers. I'm a big cover artist person. I've got like 30 hanging on a wall in our back room, and we change them out. But I would start with some, like, small title or story arc and just see what you can do. But yeah, the DC app, I had DC Universe, but I didn't make the plunge. Once they moved it all over to HBO, I was like, I'm done. I'm gonna stop for a little bit. So.
Yeah, DC as a whole leaves a bit to be desired these days, but that's a separate conversation. But on the note of the Bronze Age, I guess I'll kind of start by asking a question similar to what I asked Rich last episode when we talked about the Silver Age of Superman. I mean, generally speaking, because again, for me, most of this was new, but for you, I know some of it was new, but a lot of it you were already familiar with and was part of your collection and reading history. So overall, what was this reading experience like? What were your overall impressions of Bronze Age Superman?
It's funny. So, like, I speak in analogies a lot, and as a musician, I feel like it was a crescendo of quality over the Bronze Age. It starts very interesting, and we'll get into it with Denny O'Neil's stuff. But I feel that over the course of the Bronze Age, right up until the Mongol comic that we read, I really feel the quality of writing, the quality of cohesive art and paneling and writing. It got better and better over the course of the Bronze Age. And it was kind of cool to see the ones that we picked really almost tiered that very nicely. And I'm sure we're going to touch on that too. But I find this Bronze Age Superman to be compassionate, very contemplative. It's very character driven. We start to see the reasoning why Superman's character is a kind of a linchpin in the DC universe. We start to really understand why people grab onto Superman. And there's a whole faction of people that, I don't like Superman because he's too powerful. I like Batman because he's a little darker. And I've heard your podcast and I've talked about this, but I feel the Bronze Age is where we start to see Superman's character.
I echo that 100%. That was very much my takeaway from this era. I don't know that I was quite as taken with Bronze Age Superman as I was with the early Golden Age stories, which I know I keep saying in every episode, but I was so impressed with those. They grabbed me in such a powerful way. So I don't know if these stories quite rise to that level, but I really did enjoy the reading project. And yeah, you do definitely see more of an emphasis on Superman as a person. I mean, I joked in the Silver Age episode, although it really wasn't a joke, that I didn't really find that version of the character believable as a person. You know, he's more of an entity, I guess, but or a plot device. I mean, there really wasn't much for me, at least, to really connect with. And I feel like in these Bronze Age stories, you do get a more fleshed out character in Clark and Superman. And so I really did appreciate that. And you also get, building off of what you were saying, you do get an increased level of introspection. And the Must There Be a Superman story, I think in particular, really highlights that. But just the fact that was a question that was even presented by a comic and that Superman even considered, you would never see a story like that in the preceding decade. So stuff like that was really, really cool to see. There's a story that I know you didn't get to, and this was a really last minute thing that I threw at you, but there's a 4-part storyline, Who Took the Super Out of Superman? Yeah. And that's a story, and I'll talk about that a little bit more a little later, but you know, that's a story where basically Superman has to decide whether to be Clark or Superman full time. And he spends time investigating what it would be like to only be Clark and only be Superman. And it was really interesting. So I feel like, the level of introspection and just this bit about examining what his role in the world and in the DC universe is going to be, you know, was a big step forward. And then you also see storytelling sensibilities get more modern, get closer to what we're used to in terms of, again, just the way the stories are told, the way pages are laid out. And just to see the evolution in the art of Curt Swan, you know, was amazing. You know, all of a sudden he wasn't constrained by these grid pages, and it just opened it up, and the layouts were really cool. So, you know, to me, this feels very much like a bridge, right, between the you know, the Silver Age and then the more modern stories that we know. So it was really interesting. I mean, and then plot-wise, you know, this was the era, of course, that saw Clark become a TV news anchor, which I have some thoughts on. I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah.
You know, we also saw, you know, the evolution in some villains as well. Of course, you know, Lex was in his green war suit, and we saw the next evolution in Brainiac, and Toyman got more dangerous. Yeah. So, you know, we had things like that going on, and Superman's power level, right? He was no longer juggling planets, and that, I think, is a good segue, I suppose, to Kryptonite Nevermore, which I know you and I talked about this ahead of time, and I know we're on the same page about this, and I gotta tell you. Take a drink, yeah. This reading project got off to kind of a rough start because I read the Kryptonite Nevermore storylines. This was Curt Swan on art, Denny O'Neil wrote it, and this was Superman 233 to 242, skipping issue 239, I think, was a reprint. And you know, this is actually one of the few stories that DC has kept in print from the Bronze Age. Like, you can actually get a hardcover of this, and it's on the app, which is where I read it. And yeah, it didn't quite match the expectation that I had for it. What were your impressions of Kryptonite Nevermore?
Well, okay, so let's talk about why Nevermore is really important first. I feel like it's hard because as a diagnostician, I automatically go to like, oh, this sucks. Like, we got to fix this. So why is this bad? Here's what's really cool about Nevermore. First of all, as you're talking about the Silver Age in your last podcast, you touched on this a little bit. Nevermore is the first real Superman story arc. So we don't know as readers in the early 1970s what a story arc even is. So it was a one and done. Silver Age was, as you said with Rich, you know, very aimed for the 10-year-old, very aimed for the fantastic. It was like, what the crap just happened? Oh, we erased it. It's okay. And it's gone. This is, I mean, how many issues was it, Anthony? It's like, is it? It's
like 9. Yeah.
And there's a long 9 issues. And now I think they learned their lesson a little bit as you look through the Bronze Age, at like maybe 3 or 4 parts are better for this. But that's a landmark thing to think about, that before Bronze Age start of Superman in Nevermore, we did not have continuous stories. So this was a great selling thing for DC to come up with. Like, oh, we want them back next month. Let's make it a part 2. That's another thing too. Again, my nerdy side of research. This is the first point. I don't know if you know this, but this is the first point where Superman became a monthly comic.
Oh,
So it wasn't always a monthly comic. It sometimes was bi-weekly. It traded off with Action. Not until 1970 do we actually see a comic every single month. Now, us crazy people, we have DC pumping out weekly things, and we get upset when that happens. Yeah, so it's a positive change for comics as an industry and for readers to have a story. And really, truthfully, I think that's a big reason why we don't have a lot of collected editions of the Silver Age. Is the Bronze Age is easier to put in a trade. What are they going to do for Silver? It's really kind of cut. It's hit or miss. Oh, I'll pick this one or this one. Kind of like the Superman in the 70s, Superman in the 80s. So I think that's where my brain goes with the positives on Nevermore. But before we talk into the other stuff.
Yeah, no, I actually was not aware of that as far as the publishing history and frequency and all of that. So yeah, that was very interesting. And yeah, I guess, let me preface, because again, I know you and I were not the biggest fans of the storyline, but I do,
Yeah.
Again, it's very easy with the benefit of all of these decades to look back and point out what maybe could have been done better. But I do recognize at the time, I mean, this was a big pivot for the character. And so I definitely appreciate what it attempted to do. So I'll just put that out there to start.
Yeah.
So moving forward, so then what were your impressions of the story? And I guess just for by way of quick setup, it's called Kryptonite Nevermore. So one of the outcomes of the story is that all the kryptonite on Earth is turned to harmless iron, right?
Yeah.
And of course, kryptonite would later come back because the chain reaction that affected all the kryptonite on Earth didn't affect the kryptonite in space, so they still had a little bit of an out. But one of the things that was funny, well, actually, you know what? I'm going to save that for a second. So that's one of the main things. And then by the end of the story, Superman's powers have been decreased significantly, though my understanding is that was very quickly discarded by subsequent stories.
Yeah, and
like the full depowering.
It is, I will tell you, and you know as a fan too, you've read, if you look at the 1995 to even present, there are definitely some runs that go off the rails and you're going, wait, what? Is this the same writer? You've had some podcasts where you talk about the fact that you got 4 Superman writers in a month sitting in a room trying to figure out how to connect all this, and then they go off on their own. This was one guy. And I don't know, like the word that I kept writing in my notes was bananas. Like it would go from totally Superman that we know to off the rails, weird decision making. Like he is almost like multiple personality, like from one issue to the next. We see like really wholesome, helpful Superman, and then like really sad, I'm an awful person Superman, which is so confusing.
Yeah, this does really run the gamut. This is what I was going to say before that I started to laugh. I can't really say this is a criticism of the story. I guess was very mistaken going into this about what the meat of Kryptonite Nevermore was going to be, because again, based on the title and based on my limited knowledge of it, I really thought the bulk of the story was going to be the removal of kryptonite as a threat. And that happens in the first 2 pages.
That's it. And that's it. That's nothing. We get no more than that. And like I was assuming, and it's funny thing that, I mean, we're talking about 1971. So granted, I have back to the 70s, but this is the first time I read Nevermore. So I was super excited because the premise is kryptonite is now all turned to iron. So Superman can be jacked, and who is going to stop him? He can finally do what he needs to do and not be afraid. But it is done in 2 pages, and then it is just such a zigzag of weird stories for the next 9 issues.
Yeah, so it definitely challenged my preconceived notions about what the story is going to be. I will say, though, to Denny O'Neil's credit, it was clever to begin, but and like you said, one of the biggest criticisms about Superman is he's too powerful. I think it was a very clever reversal to begin with the removal of one of 2 things that can hurt him.
Yeah.
And then by the end of the story, significantly decrease his power set. So like you at the beginning of the story, you're like, well, now like almost nothing can hurt this guy. Which I also have to say, it's funny, and maybe this is more of a subject for another time, but the whole idea about magic, I guess I never I guess I've never really gotten why that's considered like a weakness. Like, why? I don't know. I feel like, and maybe this does go back to the fact that he's had like various power sets over the years and some wonky stuff that kind of came and went. But it's like, his abilities are primarily physical. So it's like, well, yeah, he's vulnerable to magic. It's like, why wouldn't he be? I don't know why that's necessarily always has to be like singled. You know what I mean? Singled out.
Or yeah, it shouldn't be surprising. And I hate that I've thought about this a lot. Like, it's so sad that you sit. This is the kind of conversation I have with myself. It's like, everybody needs to understand, and actually the layman doesn't always really fully put together that Superman is only powerful in our solar system. Like, he is a solar battery, and just like our iPhone, he done. Like, when he runs out and he's not around a yellow sun, he's toast. So his abilities are natural. So it kind of makes sense that the supernatural would affect him, just like it affects everybody else. Honestly, there could be a whole podcast episode just on like abracadabra Superman, you can call it, or whatever, and just touch on all the weird, like whether you go to the magic side, you go to the hell with Rose and Thorn, and all of those kind of moments. What was the other? I forget. There was like it wasn't the devil, but there was like almost. Was it Karma or Kismet? That's what it was. It was like the weirdest characters they started pulling around in the late 90s, early 2000s, which is we call the dead zone in Superman lore. But right before your favorite Jeff Loeb takes over, it is quite the dead zone. But yeah, I was hoping for a lot more, I guess, from the Kryptonite's not a factor. So what's he going to be able to do with this? But it does go off the rails. And as a story arc, it doesn't seem like a story arc.
Right. And so I think now this might just be because I was with you as you were talking about the fact that this was, the first, a time where they're not done in one stories and you're really following something over truly an extended period of time here. It's not like they all of a sudden, it's a 2-part story. I mean, this went for quite a while. Yeah. But I think that, and maybe we can just chalk this up to some growing pains of an early story arc where, these days, right, everything is so heavily serialized and it's assumed that you're going to read all the parts. And, if you miss an issue, well, you can buy it on Comixology or you can wait for the trade. Right. Like, you can get it. You can go to a comic shop. Yep. You can order online. Obviously, you didn't have that then. So I feel like as much as this is an arc, I think they still had to sort of structure it in a way where you can read each issue on its own. But so the effect is that you have the same thing happening, like issue after issue. So in the first part where, all of Kryptonite on Earth is, rendered harmless, we have the creation of this Sandman creature in the form of Superman. And we ultimately find out it's this being from another dimension, and it siphons off Superman's power. So it's like issue after issue of Superman trying to perform one of his heroic feats, and then the sand creature that for most of the story doesn't even speak kind of flies by, and Superman loses part of his powers, and whatever he's doing becomes infinitely more difficult, which was, again, very interesting, and you get to see Superman sweat in a way that you wouldn't normally. But it's like issue after issue of that happening, and after a while, it does get a little repetitive and tedious.
Well, and I think historically, this is Denny O'Neil's first attempt at Superman, and I think it's his last attempt at Superman. I think they were like, "Ooh, let's give him a try at that, see how it goes." But then I believe he then moved on to Batman and other things. But it is, when I say the word bananas, it is, and this could be just for us as we haven't read as much consistently from the end of the Silver into the Bronze, but I kept writing like quick, like asterisk notes of things that superheroes can do that we didn't think they can do, but they can do. So, for example, like Wonder Woman knows how to pick locks. There's weird stuff that just comes around. Like, why does she know how to do that? Like, Lois Lane knows karate, and I don't know where that came from. And I don't know whether that was like out of some late Silver Age 60s infatuation with martial arts, but it was reading it, as a first time reader, it was going like, what just happened? Where am I? Like it was hilarious to me. I was laughing out loud, which would like really make Renee, my wife, laugh because she's like, is it funny? I'm like, oh yeah, it's crazy. It's just weird. Like it's just.
Okay, so I had a similar experience during this story arc when, again, Superman's really struggling with his power level, and he's unable to save this building from collapsing. And I will say, I think it was a powerful moment where you see him fail in a way that he typically doesn't. Mm-hmm. And then like the next scene is him like walking the streets of Metropolis. Yes. And he's getting heckled. I don't know if it's like construction workers or something, but they're like they're like throwing these jabs at him. They're like, "Hey, Superman, better watch out for falling buildings."
Yes.
And it was so funny to me how quickly they turned on him. But I will say this, in all fairness, it did lead to what I thought was one of the more interesting, resonant moments of the storyline where, via the thought bubble, Superman's like, how quickly do these people forget all the things I've done for them? And, not necessarily in an arrogant way, but even if there is a touch of arrogance, I think it's earned. I mean, it's like, how many times has he saved the city and the world and the universe? And so I thought the fact that, and I think, again, when we want to talk about, kind of drawing a line between these various eras, I think a moment like that, as small as it was, I think that really does point to a shift that we're seeing. Because I don't think you would have necessarily gotten that in an earlier story. He calls them ingrates.
Yes. And, okay, so can I lightly swear on this podcast? I just want to make sure we have PG-13. So here's what I wrote when I read 240. Issue 240, I see that panel, and it says, I wrote, well, Superman screwed up. People get shitty. He's basically like, well, F those people. But then on the next page realizes he can't do that. Like it's legit where he feels so bad. And he's like, no, screw those people. That's not cool. And he's like, but wait a second. No, I've worked on this. And you do see, that's what I'm talking about, that contemplative side, that introspective side where he's like a regular person. We see Clark Kent in Superman. Yeah. Like how would you or I respond to like, you're just trying to do something good for people. And then, it's not perfect, but then you get like heckled by the crowd and you're going like, no, screw you guys. But then he's going, you know what? They don't know any better. I'm still trying. They mean well, that kind of stuff. So it is just funny because I'm reading this and like you just going, wow, that's just weird. Like what a weird emotional shift inside the book. And it was within a page and a half, Anthony. It was real quick.
Yeah, that's the thing. It is a bit, you get a little bit of whiplash with this. But again, the fact that the story was even going in that direction, was interesting. We also have in the story, Morgan Edge now owns Galaxy Broadcasting Company, which owns the Daily Planet. And very early on in the story, he puts Clark on TV. And, this was a staple of the Bronze Age stories where, Clark was not just a newspaper reporter, but an on-air TV news anchor. And I'll say a couple of things. One, because I knew this plot point, even though I had never really read many stories, dealing with it. I thought it was going to feel more dated than it did. In fairness to the story, I don't know. It didn't. I didn't necessarily find it jarring in that sense, but it's just I feel like, as far as the believability of Clark being able to keep his secret, this really, really pushes it. And it also, aside from the fact that, he's on TV, people will see him. Of course they would even putting that aside, it also makes Clark a celebrity. And there's a story that was not quote unquote assigned, but right before we started, I found a couple of other ones on the app, thankfully, surprisingly. And I was reading them, and there's a story where Clark loses his job. It's ultimately a machination of Lex, and we can get into that later. But he loses his job, and he's on the unemployment line, and like all the people behind him are talking about him because they all recognize Clark Kent from the news, and it's like giving him that level of celebrity. I don't think that really works. What was your take on Clark because again, we see this throughout the Bronze Age.
Well, so I was trying to think about that. So like you said, one of the staples is Morgan Edge shifts to now TV. And I was thinking, like, you know what? That makes total sense, though. If you think about early 1970s, late 1950s, we see the dawn of color TV. You know, now we're heading into 1970, where pretty much every household has a television. We are now fully vested in media as television. It does kind of seem stupid to have a comic book character only be a newspaper reporter. Like, it seemed like that kind of made sense. Like, let's be more relevant. Let's make it seem more present day. And now it seems archaic to us. Like, if anything, now Superman should be an influencer. But like, that is the first thing. And I forget which issue it was. Was he covering a volcano eruption?
Yeah.
And then he had to like place the camera in a way where he could like do the quick blurb and then like quickly get off camera, change, be Superman, and come back. And I'm going, oh, how does he not screw this up? How does he not accidentally come back in front of the camera wearing his glasses and Superman outfit? Like, I just feel like as a reporter, it's so much easier. You're just writing a story. But now it's like, I can see you. Like, you are clearly Superman and you just have glasses on. Like, I don't know. But that's been the argument from people for decades. Like, if I'm wearing glasses, I'm Bernie with glasses. It's not like, that bald guy kind of looks like Superman. But like so it's just kind of weird.
Although I will say this in defense. Well, actually, two things. One, Henry Cavill, I think when Batman v Superman was coming out, he went to Times Square and like he put glasses on. He's still like, no one recognized him. But that aside, a personal experience, so a few years ago, I got LASIK, which was amazing and life-changing. But yes, prior to that, I had very poor eyesight, and so I primarily wore contacts. But every now and then, if I was lazy, whatever, I would just wear glasses. And I mean, this is not an exaggeration. I mean, there was one day I went to work with my glasses, and yes, people ultimately recognized me, but I did get a number of like, oh, I didn't recognize you at first. And so it's the sort of thing that like, yes, after an extended period of time, of course someone would recognize him, but at least initially, and again, I've experienced this. It's like, it's enough to kind of like throw people off a little bit, but yeah, putting him on TV like that, I think just so pushes it. I feel like, because again, obviously, right, the role that a newspaper serves, the place that it occupies in society has changed a lot from 1938 to now. But I feel like more recent stories, and again, I know I'm always talking about how much I love Birthright, but I feel like Birthright, and that was early 2000s, but I feel like that did a nice job of showing recognizing that the state of the print journalism industry has changed without taking too far of a leap. Because, in that story that, Perry's barking about like updating the homepage and stuff like that. So like it shows that it's like, okay, the content is being delivered in a different way, but the job itself is still kind of ultimately the same. Whereas this, again, put Clark in a completely different situation. And again, I guess I get the instinct to try something different, but yeah, I mean, putting him on TV, I feel like was a bridge too far.
Well, and it's dangerous. I guess we have to remember that it's 1971. So everything is live television. There are no DVRs. Yeah. There are no VCRs. There's no access to rewind it. It's like, bloop, gone. And that's it. So at the same token, that's kind of how Superman is. He's there. He fixes it. He's gone. Like, you don't really get a chance to stand in front of him unless you're Lois Lane, Jimmy, maybe a few other villains. It's not like they have a lot of close contact like you and I are having right now, where you know exactly every feature of Superman's face. You just know, oh, he's a tall dude that's kind of buff. He's got black hair. Now, with that being said, funny side note. As I'm reading and I'm looking at, is Kurt Swan the, think. Yeah, he's the artist on Nevermore. Did you notice that? Do you think the casting, Snyder folks, I really think that they looked at this artwork and looked at Henry Cavill. Like, there were a few times where I saw the wider face look a little more Cavill than Christopher Reeve. And now the only Christopher Reeve that I've ever seen really in a comic is Gary Frank.
Yes.
Like, Gary Frank purposely just, and that's all of his art. It looks like everybody looks like Christopher Reeve, but yeah, it was really weird kind of looking through it going like, ooh, I think the Snyderverse is kind of based out of the Bronze Age. Is that even possible? So, except for Batman. But I just noticed Henry Cavill's looked more like the Bronze Age Superman than the modern Superman.
Huh, interesting. I didn't pick up on that specifically, but I'll have to go back and take another look. This is, again, a separate conversation, but yes, Gary Frank did draw obviously heavy inspiration from Christopher. I mean, it is Christopher Reeve on the page, and ultimately, and there will be at least an episode in the future looking at the run that he did with Jeff Johns, and as much as I guess we're a little split here, because as much as I like his art generally, and I like a lot of especially the early Jeff Johns stories. Mm-hmm. And as much as I appreciate and admire that first Christopher Reeve Superman movie, I think its influence has been carried a bit too far. I mean, I feel like everything needs to be modeled after it, and I think that's part of the problem that we have with trying to attract like new fans to the character, because it's like there are different ways to present the character.
I think we're in agreement. The reason I love that last Sun run, I think that's what it is, mm-hmm. right? It's the Johns and Donner. I think they're paying homage to it. I think it's like, what if we were still kind of in that universe? So we used the setting and the characters, but then they made it a little more rough and a little more current. That's what I liked. I feel like Jeff Johns in his best writing paid homage to old characters and made them new. The weird thing is, Anthony, I think, is that like 06?
Yeah, something like that.
I think 15 years ago. So like, I can't even imagine what people are listening to this podcast. We're talking about the Bronze Age. So let's say, are you 34?
Yes.
All right. So I'm 44. That means, so now I want you to imagine what a 24-year-old is thinking. So the Bronze Age alone must seem like the pyramids were just made like that. So I look at movies the same way. When I grew up loving Abbott and Costello movies, my dad showed me because he was young and he loved Abbott and Costello. But now we're talking like 1930s, 40s, and 50s. Might as well be the Revolutionary War to most people. Like it is, it's the same kind of mentality. Like Saving Private Ryan and Braveheart and Forrest Gump are now almost 30 years old.
I check myself all the time, and you're spot on. And it's like, if a young guy or girl were looking for some Superman back issues right now, if they were looking for some old stuff, they'd probably be looking at the New 52, which is 10 years old.
Keep looking. Just keep looking.
So I know it is really fascinating, but again, we see Clark, take to the airwaves in this and throughout the Bronze Age. But what else?
Sorry, the hardest. Every sentence you say, I feel like every sentence you say is easy to go off the rails into another podcast. So I'm really sorry if I'm like all over the map, because it's just, there's a lot to uncover in this that stems. So much of what we know today points back to the Bronze, but also in a weird turn. So we'll get into that later.
Yeah. I mean, again, as far as Kryptonite Nevermore, overall, I felt that the threats that he was facing were more grounded, but then there were outliers. There were a few, kind of supernatural ones. There was the story with the Devil's Harp, where the villain of the piece can steal abilities from other people by playing this harp. There was another issue where Superman was hypnotized and like transported to this other planet and got involved in this intergalactic police chase. There was some out there stuff, but I feel like overall it was more grounded, and it allowed for moments like the one we discussed where he is feeling some frustration at, as he calls these ingrates. There's also there's a point where he's basically completely powerless, and there are some thugs who beat him.
Oh, yeah.
And I feel like the level of violence that you see, I mean, it's not graphic by today's standards, but I feel like the level of violence that you see compared to what you would be used to from the Silver Age was far more pronounced.
Yeah. I I mean, it's amazing. I pulled it into a Google Doc, but then I thought it was easy to look on my phone. But when I pulled it in, I had 6 pages of notes, Anthony. So I'm kind of scrolling through, going like, what were the most interesting, odd moments of Nevermore? So, okay, you're Superman. You have had your powers kind of taken away. So you're not fully in control of what's going on. But gosh, where is it that I went, whoa. So there were 2 pilots in a plane, and then he's like flying, but then like because the other Superman, the sand Superman is near, power levels go down. He's all out of whack. He's trying to, I think, stop these terrorists or the guys flying the plane. So now his thought is, I'm going to punch through the top of the plane and knock both guys out. So to me, that was like, oh my. Like, he's not sure about his powers, but I'm going to trust that I'm not going to accidentally like punch through the plane and then just like splatter brains all over the cockpit. That's where I was like, oh God, okay, just Bernie, remember it's a comic book. But at the same time, I'm like, dude, pay attention to what's happening around you.
Yeah, I know there are things like that, and then going back to what I was saying before about him getting beaten by these thugs, he
Yeah.
Unbeknownst to him and to the audience initially, he's injured. He has brain damage.
Yes, he's out of it. He's out of it.
And then his powers are restored, but the brain damage is still there. And so we have like this stretch where he's like acting wildly out of character, which again was humorous. That was one of the other things that I was laughing at. We also had the character of, I don't know the correct pronunciation, I Ching, but very stereotypical caricature of an Asian person. Down to literally the yellow coloring. It was unfortunately a product of the times, I guess. I chalk it up to that rather than ill intent, but definitely very dated, does not age well.
Well, and did you catch? I wrote "Holy racist Batman." Somebody referred to him as Charlie Chan.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my gosh! Like, I mean, and again, I'm thinking in a 2021 lens. Not that it makes it okay, but I was like, that's just unfortunate that was how things were and people were treated at that point.
Yeah, and it's like the Asian mystic. It's like I feel like it just plays into any stereotype that you would have about the character. But he becomes Superman's guide, sort of through navigating this sand creature that's siphoning his strength. And we've been going almost an hour, so I know I'm kind of jumping ahead, but I want to make sure we get to all the other stories. But
no, that's fine.
But the thing that I guess at the very end of the story, and this was where it really lost me, was the sand creature has siphoned an amount of Superman's power, and the mystic offers to restore, or at least try to restore, Superman's full power, and Superman turns him down.
Yeah.
Because it's something along the lines of, and maybe you remember the line more specifically, but something along the lines of like, well, I know power can corrupt, or something like that. Like, I know what too much power can do. So he leaves power on the table and chooses not to get it. And, for people who listen to the episode that we did about the TV's Crisis event and the fact that the Clark Kent of Smallville chose to divest himself of all of the power, it's like, maybe this is just a personal thing, but I just can't get past this willing forfeiture of power. I don't know, maybe it's just a personal thing, but it really bugs me. So as much as, again, I know subsequent stories, worked with a Superman who had a higher power level, looking at this story in a vacuum, he leaves this story with a far decreased power set.
Yeah.
By choice.
Okay, so that episode you did, what is that? Clark, the Arrowverse failed Clark?
Yeah, how the Arrowverse failed the Clark Kent of Smallville.
Okay, so I'm listening to that, and I love listening to your podcast because I feel like right and left. I go back and forth, like, wait, but, oh no, wait, but, and I totally agree with you where it's, dude, you're Superman. You have these powers. you can right so many wrongs. You can do these things. I get you want to have a family, but at the same time, like, you're super. You can do these things that nobody can do. Like, and honestly, the conversation I would love to have with you, and this is going to come later, is, what, and I think you've taught us a little bit, but how would we react now to like somebody with powers?
Yep.
And the Snyderverse, I think, actually deals with it much better than people really want to admit that it does. But, I felt the same way. The I Ching thing towards the end. So they're fighting. I felt like it was the most abrupt ending to a story arc also. So here's what I wrote down. They're fighting, destroying things. I Ching shows them it's an illusion. And then out of nowhere, the Sandman says, I don't have the right to Superman's powers and body. And then he's going to give him his powers back. And Superman says, no, it's okay. And he goes to think under a tree. Like that, I went, dude, you should not be thinking under a tree. Like, what are you talking about? I said, like, yep, thanks. And then like, take it all back. Like, that's it. But yeah, like you said, he's now, we don't even know what capacity he's now at. Is he like half power? He's still doing weird things. He's got super hypnotism, for God's sake. I don't even know what that means. So it just, that's a whole other Bronze Age discussion we can go through. But I am totally with you where it is, no. They put it on the table, take it back. And I think that's also a reason why Denny was like, thanks, buddy. Like, you're good.
Yeah, I mean, and again, I know I've talked about my love for the Golden Age Superman, and that was a far more modestly powered Superman. And I do think that, over the course of the Silver Age, his powers grew to really an untenable level. And so the instinct to try to rein that in, I think, is a valid one. I guess even putting aside the subsequence, but just looking at this in and of itself, I just think the way it was achieved was a bit lacking for me. But
right, yeah.
And again, yes, I could really go off on this Snyder tangent, but it's true. I really do feel like, and I guess maybe why sometimes, like with the Snyder movies, maybe it's tough for people because it's like we are familiar with, for comic book fans in particular, we're familiar with these universes populated by characters with costumes and powers. So it's like, well, it's just kind of taken for granted. And within the world of that, comic book company or whatever that it might be, it's like, everyone's okay with it. But it's like in the real world where there's no one with these powers, if someone showed up, there would be a lot of questions about who is this person? Why do they have these powers? Why are they here? How are they going to use their powers? Why and for whom? Like there would be all these questions and there would be a lot of reactions. But actually, that's one of the things that I really liked about this with Morgan Edge in particular, because he articulates that he's a harsh critic of Superman in this story. And he says, he's like, power corrupts, right? And, and so Superman has this absolute level of power. So it's like, how could he not be corrupted by this? And so again, introducing this idea. So I guess in the end, when I look at Kryptonite Nevermore, as much as some of the particulars and the execution, were a little bit of a letdown, and I guess I would have preferred the story focused a little bit differently, I suppose. Yeah. Ultimately, I do appreciate the ideas and the moments that it allows. And it, again, look, this is our first Bronze Age story. So it's like, there are going to be some growing pains. There's going to be an evolution, but this at least allows for some of that. And, there again, I would say I probably enjoyed this the least out of all the stories that I read. But I respect and I admire it. And, I guess that's ultimately where I land on Nevermore. I don't know that I would necessarily be going back to it all the time, but I appreciate what it did.
No, I don't think I never, ever need to read it again. I think I was excited because, okay, cool. Like now it's part of my journey. I'm understanding that. There's only a few things that I want to really point out, like two things, if that's cool. Sure. So we got tons of stuff to do, but I was worried because I'm listening to other podcasts and I'm looking at like the Golden Age and the Silver Age. I think you clocked it around like 2 hours and 20 minutes. Maybe I was like, oh, we'll be fine. So it's 8. It's been an hour so far, so we got a lot to do.
It's funny because I'll just say this real quick. The intention is never to do a 2-hour episode. That's not the intention. But it's just, in a lot of cases, that's what it ends up being. And I know for myself and my guests, because we talk about it after we're done recording, it's like we enjoyed it and it didn't feel like 2 hours. So my hope is that for the audience, it doesn't feel like that. And that they're as engaged as we are having the conversation. That's always the hope.
Yeah, and you got to know, and I'm going to speak mostly as a first-time guest, but I feel like long-time listener. But I listen to your podcast in chunks. So I think we got to remember that everybody's listening to this podcast based on their commute, based on their time, based on whatever they're doing while they're listening. I listen to usually in 30, 45-minute chunks. So I love when there's a 2.5 hour podcast, like, oh, cool, we're still talking about this. That's great.
Well, that's the thing, right? Because I've heard from so many people that they listen on a commute. And, I guess I got to the point where I was like, not that I'm asking the audience to do the editing for me, but I do feel like, like you can break it up. Like I trust the audience to do that. And also, I know as a podcast listener for shows that I follow, when I see a long episode, I'm happy. Because I know it's like, okay, like I can, again, whether I just settle in with it for a long amount of time or I break it up, it's like, okay, like I'm going to be with this for a while. Yeah. So that's ultimately, it's funny too. I don't know why this is not warrant on air discussion, but I schedule the episodes to publish at a certain time. And I read some article that like releasing it at 5 a.m. gets you the most listeners. I guess the idea is that you get people like when they wake up in the morning before their commute. And I tried that for a little bit. I didn't notice a huge difference, but ultimately, and I might change this again, but I went back to midnight because I'm up late. And for the podcast that I follow, when I see the new episode pop up at like 12:05, I'm happy. And so I was like, you know what? That's how I like my stuff to come out. So that's what I'm going to do. So again, for the night owls or people in other time zones, that's why I stick with the midnight Eastern release. Yeah.
So for everybody listening, if we talk for 3 hours, consider it a 3-part 1 hour episode each. Okay, you'll be fine.
Yes. All right. So I'm sorry. So go ahead. Yeah.
No, dude, it's okay. So let's close up Nevermore. Few things really fast that I was like, okay, this is interesting. So what we should know about Bronze Age that is really super important. A few things. Jack Kirby used the Jimmy Olsen title. And I don't know, I think you might know this, but I don't know if you do. So the Jimmy Olsen title actually was used to revamp into what we know as the Fourth World.
Yes.
So the Bronze Age introduced Darkseid. The Bronze Age introduced all of those characters that are bigs in the DC universe right now. And I mean, again, going back to the Snyder cut, all that kind of stuff, like people lost their poop when Darkseid, Granny Goodness, Desaad, everybody's there. So this is the start. And now the cool connection, which did you catch the Morgan Edge Darkseid comment?
Yeah.
That's what I love. Where is it? I was like, ooh, that's cool. So I love the fact that Morgan Edge is like a baddie, but he's really not. We don't know yet who he is. We know he's not a great guy, but now we all of a sudden hear he's connected to the Fourth World. We're like, okay, that's cool. So I loved that side of things. I'm trying to think if there's anything else that is like, I mean, the racist stuff we talked about a little bit. No, like I think this was a good experimental story arc. There were a lot of little things, but okay. Last thing. Did you catch how the opening page of every story sounded like a radio opening?
Yeah, I don't know that I necessarily equated it to radio, but yeah, I mean those setup pages for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Go. I'm not telling you to read it all again. Just go back and like there's the first like 3 boxes. It totally sounds like last time on Superman we experienced, and it was like. It was kind of like this, on Netflix, the skip intro thing we always press. It did that again. Like it did that for the readers. Cause you're right. We're not at a point as consumers that we may have purchased every single issue. So I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. They did like last time in Superman 239, I dug that. I think that's cool. That's not something we get anymore. Now it's hey, if you're going to buy Superman, We expect you to tell your comic book shop to save it and put it in your box, and you're going to know what's going on. We're not going to give you the benefit of that doubt. So I thought that was kind of cool. So those are my last real moments on Nevermore, and I'm excited to now talk about the other 3 things that we have in the Bronze Age.
Yeah, for sure. And actually, that's a perfect point to jump to a quick commercial break. And then, when we come back, we'll get into the rest of those stories. So we will be right back. Hope you'll consider joining my Patreon community. The support of my patrons enables me to produce this podcast, and patrons get rewards too, including exclusive episodes, advanced listens, and more. Sign up today and get instant access to the back catalog. Visit patreon.com/Anthony Desiato. Thank you to all of my patrons. I truly appreciate your support. Film lovers and filmmakers should check out this family of film festivals: Brightside Tavern in Jersey City, Hang On to Your Shorts in Asbury Park, Point Lookout on Long Island, and In the Cut in Bloomfield, New Jersey. Submission information for filmmakers, as well as details about the festivals generally, can be found at filmfreeway.com. Also, be sure to listen to the Hang On to Your Shorts and Cullen on Film podcasts, available via a shared universe network. The Hive Comics and Games is an oasis of nerd fun and events in the heart of Odessa, Texas. Whether it's comic book superhero stories or role-playing in a dungeon, the Hive is where to be. Come tap your mana and face off against the top Magic the Gathering players in West Texas. Hive carries a majority of new comic titles each Wednesday and has all of your favorite titles in their back issue section. Follow them on Facebook at The Hive Comics and on Instagram at The Hive Comic Shop. All right, and we're back. I guess I would love to jump to Must There Be a Superman? The Elliot S. Maggin story from, I have my own notes here, right, from Superman 247, 1972. Where, so I mean, Superman completes a mission for the Guardians of the Universe, and while he's recuperating from the mission, they play some mind games on him. And like they plant this idea through their conversation about whether, Superman's presence on Earth and the role that he's playing is impeding the culture's advancement. And so like they start to bring it up in conversation, and they quickly drop it before they can really explore it. And then they start whispering about it, knowing that he'll overhear them with his super hearing. But it implants this idea of, again, as the title of the story suggests, must there be a Superman? Which again, I thought was really interesting and a very cool idea to have explored. What was your take on this story?
So really cool. We're like 5 or 6 issues from Nevermore. Okay, so what I right away noticed is the tone is totally different. It is much more irrelevant. I think it's relevant today. I really enjoyed reading this one. It is a Superman again being contemplative, wait a second, am I slowing down the cultural movement or the progression of the human race because I'm helping too much? I think he proves really, really well in this issue why, if Superman was here today, he could solve big picture things, but he shouldn't get involved in the little minutia. And what I mean by that is like, what is the quote he said? What I loved. Oh, okay. So they're picking on the kid. So the kid is standing up. He's the only one that is actually going to go through with the strike, where the farmers are not getting paid their due. They're working hard. The kid, he's probably like 13, 12 years old. And then Superman shows up and he goes, whoa, wait a second. You're here. Why didn't you stop this? You're all pretty brave now that I'm here. Now that Superman's here and I can like break this guy in half, you're all real. You've got like Superman muscles. But he said, you were here. You could have helped this. You should have done this. That story from 1972 might as well be written in 2021. Like, that's what I was like, whoa, this is way ahead of its time. But if you think about it, we're still talking about race relations in the early 70s. We're talking about inappropriate payment for immigrants and migrant farmers. I loved this issue, Anthony.
As I did as well. You know, it's one of those ones like that's included in the I think the 80-year hardcover. You know, it's one of those stories that always gets reprinted. And going into it, I was like, well, how good could it be? You know, because sometimes things are built up so much and it's hard to live up to it. But this was great. And yeah, the scene, you know, with the farmers was very, very strong. And because it does, you know, call to mind that question. It's like, in an ideal scenario, what does Superman's presence in the world do? Well, it emboldens the other people around this kid to step in when they see him being hurt. But that's, unfortunately, in this case, that's not the effect that it has. And, you know, so Superman articulates exactly what you described. And then it's, and not to laugh, but it's like, then there's this earthquake and like all their homes are destroyed and he has to save them and he has to rebuild their homes and they're all cheering for him. And he's like, listen, I only did this because this wasn't a problem you could foresee or solve on your own. But for things like the bullying that this kid was experiencing, you shouldn't need me. This, there's the scene, the first thing that came to mind with this was, the scene in Superman, the movie, which that will be its own episode down the line. But it's like, you can't have a discussion of Bronze Age Superman and not talk about Superman, the movie. I mean,
no. You know, we're getting there. We're going to talk about it. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah. I mean, as much as Adventures of Superman, the George Reeves series, you know, was a big piece of the end of the Golden Age into the Silver Age. Similarly here, you know, this was, as far as adaptations and just like global events, Superman wise, I mean, the release of Superman, the movie in 78, like that was it. But there's the scene, and I believe this was cut out of the theatrical version, but it's in the special edition and the 3-hour cut, where Superman has this heart-to-heart with Jor-El after his first night of superheroics. Yeah. And Jor-El says, okay, you have to still keep your secret identity. And Superman says, why? And Jor-El's like, well, the reasons are twofold. The second reason is that villains would go after his friends and family to get at him. But the first reason is that if you were Superman all the time, like the humans would rely on you constantly and they wouldn't solve problems that they would be able to solve themselves. Jor-El says, he's like, humans, like it's their nature to abuse whatever resources they have. So that's what I thought of when I read this issue.
It's really interesting. So are you caught up yet with the Superman and Lois show by any chance?
I'm one episode behind as of this recording.
As am I. Okay. So that means you saw the episode where Superman randomly hears the robbery happening in Mexico or Guatemala or something like that. And I listened to that and I'm going like, oh man, could this be any more relevant to what we're about to talk about? Like I like vehemently disagreed with that. I was like, seriously, like he shouldn't be solving bank robberies. He's Superman. Like if there's a mudslide that's going to destroy an entire village, that's what Superman does. Like I can't do that. A fireman can't do that. A police officer can't do that. I loved this, I keep saying episode, this issue, because Superman can rebuild houses after an earthquake. He can't stand up for what's right. He can help you like smack you in the head and go, guys, you can do this. You can be Supermen and women by being strong-charactered, by standing up against bullies and those kind of things. But natural disasters, those kind of things, that's what Superman does. Standing up for what's right needs to come from people. And that's why I loved this issue. That's what I walked away with going, oh, he's really now thinking, what is my role? Must there be a Superman? Yes. But there are like guidelines. Like what should Superman really do is what the end of the title should now be.
There's actually an episode that I'm going to do not too long from now, actually. But we're going to take a look at a few stories like Superman 4, The Quest for Peace, Superman Peace on Earth, the Alex Ross story. Yeah. There's an issue from Batman No Man's Land, a few stories that all kind of point at this question of like, well, what should he do? I mean, if he has all this power, should he not disarm the world of nuclear weapons? Right. Should he not, eliminate world hunger? It's like, what should he be doing? Which I think really is an interesting question. this gets at that. But the thing that one of the other things that I really love about this is that I don't feel like the story gives an answer, but I think that's a good thing. It's the fact that he's just thinking about this. That I think makes it so effective. And there really isn't an easy answer. But yeah, this is a standout story. I mean, definitely a quintessential Bronze Age Superman story. Again, there's this level of introspection that you don't normally get. And even just from the beginning of the story, like he's doing this mission for the Guardians. It's like you see him more out there in the DC universe. And there are, well, I guess For the Man Who Has Everything features Batman and Robin and Wonder Woman. Most of the rest of the stories that we're talking about don't necessarily do that. But again, throughout the Bronze Age, you did have more of him interacting with the rest of the DC universe. So another hallmark of the era. You know, while you were mentioning about, some of the social issues that this issue touched on, one of the issues that I read that this was not assigned, but it was in the Superman in the 70s trade. It's an issue of Lois Lane, issue 106 from 1970. I Am Curious, Black. Have you ever read that? Where Lois becomes a black woman for a day?
You know, I've heard about it, but I've not read it. What issue is it?
It's 106.
Oh, okay. From Superman 106?
It's Superman's girlfriend, Lois Lane.
Oh, it's Lois Lane 106. No, I don't have that one. No.
Yeah, so it's an issue of Lois Lane from 1970, so right at the very beginning of the decade. I thought this was a very, very powerful, interesting issue, and I was surprised that they went where they did, at the very beginning of 1970. But yeah, the basic premise is that Lois is trying to do a story in a black neighborhood, and everyone, turns her away. And so Superman has this transformation chamber and transforms her into a black woman for a day. It was, in the last episode, I used the Friends analogy when talking about Silver Age Superman. In this episode, are you familiar with Family Matters?
Oh, gosh, Steve Urkel and
So Steve Urkel with his increasingly outlandish, out-of-this-world inventions, including a transformation chamber. That's what I thought of when I was reading this story. Anyway, look, it's a contrived device, but the end result is that Lois spends 24 hours as a black woman. And, the same cab driver who was so quick to pick her up at the beginning of the issue drives right by her and picks up a white man instead. There are a few instances like that. And, this time she is welcomed within the black community. And, she sees there's one woman in particular who takes her in who, doesn't live in a great place and doesn't have a lot, but still offers her hospitality. And that really makes an impression. And then there's this activist a black activist who is shot. And Lois gives him a blood transfusion. And at the end of the episode, after she's returned to her white skin, she approaches this man, and he had previously turned her away, but now he embraces her. And so the last panel is, the two of their hands, a black hand and a white hand together. And it was really powerful. I feel like, though, this story had its limits because there was this exchange between Lois and Superman where Lois says, well, if I'm not able to, return to being a white woman, like, would you still marry me? And Superman, he's like, well, how could you even ask me that? It's like, I'm the ultimate outsider, seeming to imply that, no, it wouldn't make a difference. Yet he then says, but I can't marry anyone because I'm Superman. And I feel like that was the limitation of how far they would go. Right.
Right.
But again, for 1970, I mean, it was I thought, a very forward-thinking story, and definitely, again, an outlier as far as all of the, the ones that we're talking about. But I did read that in the trade. I wanted to bring it up, and it ties in again to what you were saying about, some of the social issues. Fascinating issue.
Is that issue in the 70s trade?
Yeah.
Oh, I missed that. I'm so excited to go back. You said it's 106.
Yeah, so that's in there. And, kind of, I guess one other thing when we're talking about changing storytelling sensibilities, one of the things that, we're seeing a shift here. One is that the creators are finally credited in all of these issues. You didn't always have that before. And, in the Silver Age, you started to see a shift, and we talked about this in the last episode, where stories would last an entire issue, but they were still broken up into chapters. Now we're finally getting to the point. Some of these stories do have backup stories, but for for a decent amount, we're getting, stories that run an entire issue. So again, the sensibilities are shifting.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's a nice segue too to start thinking about now how the 70s set up the 80s. I think really what they started to learn about in the mid 70s, the late 70s was how to tell a full story, how to use the entire issue and not just a part of it to tell an entire story. Um, Now the 80s, are you cool going on to the 80s? Are we good?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I do. There are a few other 70 stories, but we can jump back to them. Like, that's perfectly fine.
No, go ahead. Let's do the 70s first, because we also want to touch about how kind of Superman in the media changed probably the outlook of the Bronze Age and the late 70s also.
Yeah, I guess the last main thing that I do want to hit on with the 70s is that story, that 4-part storyline that, again, I know you didn't have a chance to read, but it's called
Yeah, tell me about it.
Who Took the Super Out of Superman? It's a 4-part storyline. So again, going back to these multi-issue arcs,
Yeah.
Superman 296 to 299. And this was co-written by Cary Bates and Elliot Maggin. So you had the two of them together, which was pretty rare, I think.
Yeah.
And I won't do a whole an entire plot breakdown. The plot itself was pretty silly and contrived, but the setup for it is that whenever Superman is wearing his Clark Kent clothes, he doesn't have his powers. And for most of the arc, we don't know why. It turns out there's this alien who lives next door to him who has this assignment from his homeworld, this 30-year assignment, because he arrives on Earth the same time Clark does as a baby. But what we ultimately find out is that this neighbor effectively sunscreened all of Clark Kent clothes so that when he wears them, it blocks the sun. Now, this doesn't account for the fact that he could absorb it through his face or his hands. It doesn't account for the fact that he wouldn't instantly lose his powers, right? Like he would still have them, somewhat of a reserve.
Or not wear the same clothes all the time.
Apparently he never gets his clothing dry cleaned or anything like that. There's a lot of goofy stuff about it. You know what was so funny to me about that aspect of it was this was an alien character, right?
Yeah,
and they could have given him any powers or any device. Like they could have come up with any other reason why this would work. I feel like the reason they went with was just like, why? Why would you pick that? There were so many holes in that. Anyway, that's the base. Oh, although it does lead to one of this. I was cackling down here in Flat Squirrel Studios as I was reading this, where, and this was also part of the run where like Superman or Clark was investigating Intergang and running afoul of them. And they were sending in this issue, they deliver this robot to his house to kill him. And it's, it's all boxed up though. Right. And so it bursts free and it attacks him. And he's dressed as Clark with the Superman costume underneath, and he can't do anything because he's in the Clark clothes. And so he's peeling off the clothes, but it's like even the pants around his ankles are enough to nullify his powers. It is the funniest thing that it's like his pants are around his ankles. Otherwise he's fully clothed as Superman and he still doesn't have his powers. It is hilarious.
I'm so excited because I know that for a fact that I own 296 and 299.
Okay. You got to read it.
Yeah, I'm gonna read them because that sounds ridiculous.
So now I've done the humorous part, but let me say the reason why I'm bringing this up, which is that basically Superman decides that he has to choose between being Clark. Now, you could argue, well, even if you're stuck in this situation, it's just a matter of changing your clothes, but we'll put that aside. So he spends one issue entirely as Clark for a week. And what he finds is that it's too painful for him to see these crimes and natural disasters play out where he could have stopped them. Although there are instances, to your earlier point, where there's a fire and the fire department shows up and they put out the fire. And so he sees some of these things can be taken care of, but ultimately it is too difficult for him. However, and I think it is issue 277. I think it's the second part of the storyline where he spends a week as Clark. All of a sudden, right, he doesn't have to play the meek, mild Clark. And so he takes Lois out and it's implied that they spend the night together. Yeah, and it's, again, for the 70s, it was like they're on the couch, they start kissing. It's like you don't
Oh,
normally see this. So
yeah.
he's putting the moves on Lois. He's like physically putting Steve Lombard, the sportscaster who's always picking on Clark, like physically putting Steve in his place. Like Clark is actually allowing himself to be a little aggressive, a little angry. He stands up to Morgan Edge. Morgan Edge is like, you're going overseas. And Clark's like, no, I'm not doing that. It's like, all of a sudden, like he's not held back. It's fascinating to see Clark.
Oh,
And there's also this beautiful panel where Superman is planning, to spend the week as Clark. And he says, like, I forget the exact line, but something along the lines of like, I'm looking forward to getting to know Clark and who Clark is. It was really interesting. The next issue, then he spends entirely as Superman and finds that like he's not allowed to take a break. Even Jimmy Olsen, like, is like, hey, you got to get out there and do whatever. So he finds that ultimately the moral of the story, right, is that he has to be both Clark and Superman. But I love that so much because in so many of the other pre-crisis stories, Clark really is just a means to an end for him. But this story shows, and so many of these other Bronze Age stories show, and this is why I really do appreciate the Bronze Age, that, Clark really is a part of who he is. And so I like that a lot, and this story showed it. And certainly you have the issues. I encourage you to read them. And for anyone who doesn't, they're on the website Superman Through the Ages. That's where I read them. That's the only friggin' place where you can read them. So that's where they are.
I tell you, like, so many things about what you just said sparked things about the Superman character that either have rung true or bothered me about its development over the decades. I feel like the late 70s, and I don't know whether this is chicken or egg, but whether the movies spawned this into the comics or the comics spawned this into the movies, that why we made Clark this bumbling idiot and why we had to make him so weak and powerless and meek. We could just make him a regular guy.
Right.
Like that's fine. We don't have to make him like, I feel like sometimes, I don't know whether it was the direction they gave Christopher Reeve that then bled into the comic book world, but from that point through the 80s, like, we really see Clark is kind of a doofus. He's not a stand up for himself kind of guy. You can stand up for yourself and not be Superman. Like, I think that's what I loved about the Golden Age Clark Kent. I think it was like there was Clark Kent and then Superman wore an outfit. Like, it wasn't bumbling. They were both stand-up men. They cared about people. They stuck up for people. They were strong. So I don't know. I don't. Maybe I don't know whether that was spawned from one or the other.
Well, I will say counterpoint, because now that I've gone back and I've looked at these Golden Age stories, I mean, even as early as Action Comics #1, I mean, the goons on the cover whose car gets smashed, Lois, Clark has taken Lois out dancing, right? And one of these guys, Butch, cuts in, and Clark is just like, oh, okay. So, I mean, he is playing that meek and mild pretty early, though I will say, like, and I, as you know, I did multiple episodes on the George Reeves Adventures of Superman. And it's like, yeah, that Clark was, especially in the first couple seasons, that Clark was tough. That was a character where Clark was really, I think, who he was. And then he put on a costume. Like, there wasn't really much of a division there. He was tough.
Well, and I know that you've had this, we'll call it a discussion, but I think sometimes it's been even close to an argument. You and I are on the same page where I think Smallville gets it right. I think he is Clark Kent. I think he is Clark Kent DNA, even while he's Kryptonian DNA, he is Clark Kent that happens to have Kryptonian powers. Like, that's where I get really frustrated with new turns on the character, whether it be movie, TV, comics, whatever. We can't treat him like he wasn't raised by Jonathan and Martha Kent.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't live in that house and turn out to be the guy that he should be. He just gets to leap tall buildings and fly to different planets and throw cars and stop supervillains. But, like, when you remove the Clark Kent from the Superman, he's not Superman. That's all there is to it. Like, and And every now and then when I see the bumbling Clark Kent, I'm like, I don't think he was bumbling in Smallville. So why is he now bumbling as an adult? That's what frustrates me a lot when I see that.
I agree. And, I was thinking about this in advance of this episode. I think, when I look at the various incarnations of the character in comics, but even more so in the adaptations, I think that's where this really comes into play. I think my ultimate enjoyment in a lot of instances comes down to whether I think of that version of the character as Superman or as Clark.
Mm-hmm.
And when I look at Smallville, he's Clark, obvious. I mean, of course, but even, in the Snyder movies, it's like, he's Clark. It's like, and then he puts on a costume, but he's Clark. Like, that's who he is. That's who I connect with. The Superman and Lois show, same thing. Yet, and again, there's a lot I love about the Christopher Reeve performance in the first movie, but I look at that movie, it's Superman. It's not, it's not Clark. As soon as he goes into that fortress for his 15-year tutorial, he ceases being.
Please don't even get me started on that.
He ceases being Clark. So, yeah, I think so much of that, that's always at play for me when I'm looking at this and thinking about, what I like. But I mean, I will say overall, I feel like Bronze Age treated Clark pretty well overall. Okay. I mean, I get what you're saying about the movie incarnation bleeding in. I don't necessarily disagree, but I mean, Clark, I think, is shown to be like certainly a pretty competent, reporter and news anchor and stuff like that. So I don't feel like he gets the short end of the stick, certainly not as much as he did like in the Silver Age. He's not treated as well as he is in the Byrne era for sure. But, right. But I feel like maybe this is a little bit of a middle ground. But anyway, as far as 70s stories, there might be more, but and you did mention, Jack Kirby on the Jimmy Olsen title. For anyone who wants more of that, I've got an episode. This will probably be next year, but as I plan ahead here, but we'll take a look at Jack Kirby's run on the Jimmy Olsen title and how it influenced Superman the animated series, because it was a big influence on that show. And when I think of that show, the episodes that stand out the most are the New Gods episodes for sure. Ooh. So we'll be talking about those episodes and those issues.
And they're rough. Those episodes, you almost worry a little bit, like, "Whoa, people are going down in this episode." It's pretty messy.
I'll talk about this again when we do it, but I can't not say it here. The episode where Darkseid kills Dan Turpin.
Oh, that makes me like upset visibly.
And Superman just out of sadness, anger, frustration, grief, just demolishes that Apocalypse the tank or whatever. Ooh. I mean, I remember watching that as a kid and I was like, oh, like it to this day, man, it really made a big impression on me. So we'll be talking about that. But yeah, that's that's something else that's going on here in the Bronze Age, where you have Kirby coming over, introducing this entire world of characters who, to your point, we'll see as most recently as the Snyder cut of Justice League.
On behalf of all of your guests that have ever been on your podcast, I would strongly suggest you create a panel to have 4 or 5 of us chime in on those episodes, because man, those are heartfelt. Like the Superman adventures through the JLU stuff is good stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. But so where would you like to go next as far as the movie and the 80s?
Well, gosh. Okay, so if you look at the tone of the last, if you think of the last media we really had for Superman was the Adventures of Superman TV show. The next time we get anything in the media is 1977. So how far are we, Anthony? Is that about 20 years later? I think that.
So Adventures of Superman was 52 to 58. Yeah. So we're good. Yeah. So 20 years later.
That's a long time. So, I mean, we've been blessed, like even when Smallville was on for 5 too many seasons. And then,
no.
Oh, no. I know. I just watched that show with Lana. I loved it. By the way, Lana, my daughter named after Lana Lang. So, but we never really had a large gap as people for the last 30 years, media wise. We've always had something come around the bend, whether it's Lois and Clark, Smallville, now the Arrowverse, all this, the Snyder movies, Superman Returns, which, have you done anything on that one yet? Are you talking about that one yet?
That's to come. But we'll get to that.
That's in 2024. That's at the very, very bottom of the.
No, you know what? Honestly, it's not my favorite, but I loved Brandon Routh as Ray Palmer, and then I loved when he did basically the Kingdom Come Superman in Crisis. I've wondered now as a father if Superman Returns might work for me better.
Maybe.
I still don't have the highest hopes. I think most of the issues that I had with it will remain, but I am planning to look at it with the fresh eyes of a father and see if there might be any redemption for Superman Returns. So that's the con. We'll get there.
I will gladly talk to you for 2 hours about that movie, because there's a lot to unpack just from the fact that he's a great impressionist of Christopher Reeve. So
yes,
yeah. So let's talk about the fact that, again, Adventures of Superman, 20 years later, we find now we're not talking about TV show. We're talking about You Will Believe a Man Can Fly as the poster. And sure enough, even from 1977, I took my family and each of my daughters brought a friend to a local movie theater. I guess it was definitely obviously pre-pandemic, but one of our local theaters did an anniversary showing of Superman the movie, and it holds up. I'm here to tell you, like, there's things we can pick apart about it, but to watch two teenagers not in my family who are not wedded to the character as part of their familial DNA to go, that's just a fun, good movie. Like, we have the Hollywood blockbuster approach to Superman. I think that brought a lot more people to the comics. I think there were a lot more kids reading comics, and I think that explains a whole lot more why we see the shift in tone into the 1980s. I think they took that to heart. I think it was a little more, like you had mentioned, a little Silver Age was kind of kid-oriented. I think they moved a little bit further back there into 1980, where a little more one-shots, a little more kid-oriented, a little more fantastical. What do you think about that?
I mean, it's funny, from the few stories that I read, because we on our official list is For the Man Who Has Everything, but there were a few other stories from the 80s that I read that were in that 80s trade, and I don't know that I necessarily saw that specifically, but it's such a small pool of stories that I'm working with that it's hard for me to say for sure one way or the other. Certainly, though, the movie having an impact on the comic, would make sense. I wouldn't be surprised. Although there was, I don't know if it was, now everything's like blurring together, but I don't know if it was, because Jerry Ordway wrote the introduction and like connective tissue for the 80s trade. So I don't know if it was there or another article I read, but I think the feeling was that the comics didn't properly capitalize on the movie. But I don't know if that was meant more in terms of, the sales didn't increase enough based on, what they would expect versus, more of the tone and the themes of the story.
But it was interesting. So think about Superman the movie was 1977. The average kid that would have gone to see that movie might have been 8 to 12, right? So now fast forward to the mid 80s or early 80s. Now those kids are teens pushing into young adult. I think it was really interesting. I think there were some adult things that were a little more action based, but I think it was still a little bit more Superman's got a bad guy. He's going to fight the bad guy. He's going to win them. He's going to win. There was not as much meat that I thought there would have been in the 1980s. And with the sidebar too, that in some cases, some of the Superman stories were just kind of downright boring. I was kind of surprised, actually, and especially in the early 80s.
Gotcha. So I'll share the little bit that I read that was primarily from that Superman in the 80s trade. And this immediately, when I saw the table of contents, this 2-part story immediately caught my eye, and I don't know if you've read these. Well, I guess you probably read them at some point. I don't know how well you remember them, but the Miraculous Return of Jonathan Kent and the Secret World of Jonathan Kent.
Yeah, that's also. I read the second one. I skimmed through part one, but focused mostly on part two actually. Go ahead. Tell me your thoughts about that. Tell me what.
So the basic premise is, right, Jonathan. So pre-crisis Superman, the Kents died, and that's the end of Clark's time in Smallville, and he transitions from Superboy to Superboy. I have mixed feelings to Superman. And so in this story, an elderly Jonathan Kent, basically the age he would be had he lived, shows up in Metropolis, and Lana, who knows that Pa died, sets up this dinner with Clark, and Clark can't figure out what's going on here. The fingerprints match, and he knows Clark's secret, and Clark is really at a loss here. And what we find out ultimately is that it is the actual Jonathan Kent transported here through magic or science, I guess, take your pick there. Yeah. I guess there was an issue of Superboy that was like the then new title.
It's really sweet. It's a nice idea that way back in this Superboy issue, that if he got one wish, like how could he see his son again to actually be Superman?
Yeah.
All of us that have lived through the 90s and 2000s know the post-crisis where Jonathan and Martha are healthy and alive and are a big part of his life. We don't understand that side of things. Superman's a very different Superman without his parents. So I think it's a really cool issue to talk about. I just want to see my boy be a man, and what's he doing, and how they go about it is kind of interesting.
Yeah, it struck a chord with me, and I guess I was pleasantly surprised, because as I was reading this, I'm assuming that it's going to be some clone or some evil plot or something like that. Right. And it ends up not. That's what I was very pleasantly surprised by with this story.
And that's what I'm kind of getting at, that I think an easy way to kind of sum up, honestly, except for the Mongol story that we read, most of the early 80s is pleasant. Like, they're very happy ending oriented, which I don't know whether that was also a sign of the times, like economically, socially, they needed kind of a, let's do something happy and light. Superman was the bright comic of the DC comics. And for that matter, even Batman at that point too. It was not super dark yet. But it was a really nice, happy family ending. Even though his dad's still gone, it was kind of cool that he got a chance to see his boy. But there's an amazing Jonathan Lois Clark moment that we're going to talk about, I'm sure.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so Jonathan basically outs Clark's identity to Lois. And Clark just goes, dude, Dad, like, she's right here. She doesn't know. And he's like, okay, bye. And then he bolts. Favorite line of the whole issue, though, that I wrote down is Lois says, for all you know, I had already figured out Clark was Superman, but was smart to not let on about it. So I loved that hint and possibility. I don't think they come back to it in the Bronze Age, to be perfectly honest. I think they touch on it, but if you think that through, like, Lois may very well know that Clark is Superman. She's supposed to be the best / detective-like reporter in the country, if not the world in some cases. So for her to not be able to figure that out, that's kind of fantastical within itself. I love how she's like, you know what, though? If I've known, it's okay to not let on about it. She still keeps those two worlds very, very separate. So what did you think about that?
Yeah, I love that. What's so funny, though, is that I feel like Pa, like, unnecessarily outs him, because what we ultimately find out, right, is he's there for 30 hours and basically the time will be reversed. No one will remember. So Pa knows that whatever happens now will ultimately be undone and won't count. but even still within that, I just feel like it was so unnecessary. He just keeps calling him son. It's like, like, what are you doing? But no, I like that. The bit about Lois, I really love that. And I've said this on multiple podcasts over the years, but there's that issue of Hush where Bruce visits the Daily Planet, and he's, we have his internal, monologue, and he talks about Perry White, and he's like, Perry White's too good of a reporter to not have put this together. Well, that makes me think about Jim Gordon, what a great detective he is. I'm always of the mind that like Perry White, Jim Gordon, Lois, like they have to know, but they're just, they're, whether it's that they just want to like play it cool, or they just want to, whatever the case, maybe it truly is out of respect. They feel like, well, if they're not going to tell me, I'll respect that. I don't know, but that's always, and I don't think the stories support that, but I like that interpretation.
Yeah, I totally am with you. My biggest wonder of reading all these years has been, don't you kind of think that it's not just a respect, but it's a personal safety thing? Like if Lois and Perry and Jim Gordon let on that they know they're dead. Like, look at the crazy pants supervillains that are coming after Batman as Superman. They might as well just paint a bullseye on them. The fact that like they're going to be used as leverage and hostages every day of the week. So they're probably going, I'm going to respect you, but I also would like to not have the entire Gordon family killed because I know that Batman is Bruce Wayne kind of deal. So,
yeah, no, exactly. There was one late 70s story that I know is a favorite of yours. We didn't touch on it, but Superman takes a wife. So right at this point, the Golden Age Superman has been repositioned as the Superman of Earth 2. And so we have this story, Superman takes a wife. Carrie Bates was the writer. Action 484. Also, again, I know in most of these instances we're mentioning the writer. The artist in almost all of these stories is Kurt Swan. I mean, there was an episode a while back where Ken Marion asked me my top 5 Superman artists, and I didn't include Kurt Swan at the time. I would like to amend that because just how prolific he was, how consistent the art was, and also, again, and whether this was a function of the scripts changing and or his art changing. I don't know exactly where the line is, but you really do see the art grow and evolve, as it's not like he's just drawing them the same way. So my goodness, I mean, just absolutely iconic. But yeah, so this story from Superman 78, where we check in with the Superman of Earth 2, the Golden Age Superman. What stands out to you about this storyline? This is where where the Golden Age Superman, aka the Superman of Earth 2, marries Lois Lane. First as Clark Kent when he doesn't remember that he's Superman, and then as Superman. But yeah,
gosh, okay. So I read this a long time ago, and I love, again, it's very interesting, the Lois and Clark dynamic versus the Lois and Superman dynamic. They're very, very different. It's how Lois talks to Clark, like even though they're like she loves both of them, like how she talks to Clark and how she talks to Superman, totally different. And it's just that always stood out to me as odd. Who was the artist on this one? It was still Kurt Swan on this one too. What stood out to me, Anthony? Gosh, I guess I would say how she was so still like dumbfounded that she was married to Superman. Like that she figured it out, that she was able to like have her cake and eat it too, that she was able to be with Clark and with Superman. Yeah, I mean, it is such an old story. What year is this from though?
78.
It is 70. It looks so much older though.
It was like the 40-year anniversary. It does look. Yeah, I think they tried to emulate. I guess
they
more
drew
the Golden
in a
Age
very
style.
old fashion. Yeah, Kurt like went back to a very old style. Well, and at that point too, something like the readers should know, or just like fans should know, there's a dichotomy between Kal-El and Kal-El.
Yes.
So we start to see the Earth 1 and Earth 2 shift out of the ages too. Like really Bronze Age starts to focus primarily on Earth 1. And
Yes.
it's focusing on Kal El. But then this is talking about more Kal El, Earth 2. And that's what stood out to me as like a groundbreaker that really, when you look at things like Crisis on Infinite Earths and Infinite Crisis, this is where that came from. And that's what stands out to me the most as like the historical benchmark of the issue, not so much the content. Like it's still pretty cheesy.
Though I'll say I was a fan because it was cool. Like the setup was very silly, but basically there's this like, magician who's hired by criminals, and he casts the spell to eliminate the existence of Superman, and so it's like Superman disappears underground, but with Superman gone, Clark emerges, and he doesn't have any knowledge of his life as Superman. But I guess kind of in a similar way to the storyline that I talked about before, who took the super out of Superman. It's like, now we just see Clark like just going all out as a reporter, and he does a great job, and he wins the heart of Lois and all of this stuff. And then, but he still has his powers. There is that like very humorous sequence, I guess, on the honeymoon where I think it's Intergang like tries to take him out or something like that. They shoot at him and he doesn't even feel it. But Lois clocks what's happening and she realizes she married Superman. And again, ultimately she's able to convince the magician to undo this. And so now he's fully whole. But there was a great moment too. I had forgotten about this, but it just came to mind where I think, right, Lois says to Superman, like, "Oh, I guess this is it for us," basically. Yeah. Right. And he's like, "No, like we're married and I can have this." And I thought that was great. And so then they get remarried in the fortress under Kryptonian traditions. And I thought it was. I'm glad you suggested that. I don't know that I would have necessarily read that on my own, but again, it was also a nice sort of full circle moment for me, having started with all the Golden Age stories, to kind of see that incarnation of the characters have their moment there. I thought it was great.
Did you catch too the Julie Schwartz note? That was really cool.
I don't know that I did.
So it's like the second to last page. So he's flying her to basically their like fabulous new home, this secret citadel where they can be married. Julie Schwartz, the editor, does a little cool asterisk on the bottom and just says, "The Earth 2 Superman never knew he came from Krypton until he set out to trace the origin of the first kryptonite he encountered, as recorded in Superman number 61. I love those moments. Julie Schwartz was prone through that all through the 70s and into the 80s before he passed away, that he would give those little nuggets like, "Hey, by the way, just a heads up, like if you didn't know this is important for you to know, just so you trace the timeline of who Superman is." Yeah.
It's funny, it didn't come to mind, but as you were saying it, yes, I went right back to that. And that did stand out when I was reading it, because that was one of the stories Rich and I read when we did our pre-crisis origins. And like, that was the first comic book version of Kryptonite, that's what led Superman to discover where he actually came from. So that was pivotal. So I did very much enjoy that. I had forgotten that, but I'm glad you mentioned it. I just, I want to get to, for the man who has everything and any other 80s stories that you want to talk about, but just real quick, I'll mention, because there were a few other stories that I read. There's a Brainiac story. It was called Rebirth. It was Marv Wolfman and Gil Kane, Action 544, where basically Brainiac is reborn as the mechanical version that we know, I guess, from later on.
The robot.
The robot version. To be honest, I didn't quite love the story, but it was interesting to see that evolution. There were also a few stories that I read that featured Luthor. There was one called Parasite's Power Play from 75, and that was Superman number 286. And the short version is that Lex has this whole plan that Parasite basically commandeers. Like, he steals Lex's memories and voice, and he's able to activate this plan that Lex has. And Lex and Superman end up having to work together to stop Parasite. And it was a cool story. On the note of Lex, because then there was also, I mentioned earlier the story where Clark gets fired. I don't know if this arc itself really has a name, but it was a Superman 410 and then 412 and 413, all written by Cary Bates. But basically Lex creates this device that implants memories into Superman's mind, such that Superman doesn't know what's real and what's not. And so he thinks he has this experience where he stops the satellite from crashing to Earth. And then he tells Clark about it. He writes up the story as Clark, but it turned out that it never happened. It was just an implanted memory from Lex's device. And Clark is discredited and loses his job. So it has it like Lex's plan has this inadvertent byproduct of actually hurting Clark and Superman. And Superman's questioning his sanity. Yeah, it was really cool. But I guess the reason, I mean, I'm always curious to see what Luthor is like in any particular era, but I wanted to read it just to get a couple of stories of him in his purple outfit and the green war suit. And that was what I wanted to ask you. What is your take on Lex in the war suit?
I personally don't like that at all. I mean, I get why they felt, I mean, maybe it's a good progression of the character. My automatic go-to who Lex Luthor is Lex in the black suit. Lex is the businessman. Lex is Clancy Brown. Like, he is smarter than everybody in the room, but he does not need to, I guess, go to gadgets to beat Superman. He's going to do it with the power he wields in the name of Luthor, basically. I don't know. I think when we went to the sci-fi Luthor, he needs to have the power suit to try to be more powerful. I think that takes away from the essence of Lex Luthor. Like, Lex Luthor wants to be the most powerful mind and man. He doesn't want to be Superman. He wants to beat Superman because he's a man. So anytime I see the purple suit, he's trying to be powerful like Superman, and that bothers me more.
I think, it's funny. I'm really wrestling with this. And we'll do a more of a, I think I mentioned this in the previous episode. Well, I'm going to do more of a like Luthor deep dive in the future. Mm-hmm. I think ultimately I agree with you. I think that's ultimately where I land if I really had to pick. I guess I wrestle with it because, yeah, on the one hand, exactly to your point, I love the idea that he challenges Superman in a different way than almost any of his other villains. Yet, I don't know. There is some appeal to me of this idea that, like, with this suit, like, he actually now can engage with Superman on that level. I guess, I don't know, maybe I would say I'm okay with it sparingly, but not like all the time. I don't know. Ultimately, I do agree with you, but I will say, and I mentioned this in the last episode, one of the things that's so cool about going back to all these pre-crisis stories is that, stories that I grew up reading that drew from them, now I got to see where they came from. And, famously, Jeff Loeb put Lex in the war suit at the end of the Public Enemies arc, where we get the end of his tenure as president, which I didn't really love that. For the reasons I discussed in that episode, but again, like, it was cool to see these original stories with him in the war suit. As much as I do remain mixed on it.
I may be the very small minority about this, but the only time I like Luthor in the suit is when he tries to protect Metropolis when Superman is out of commission. We see this a lot in the late 2000s, in the late 2010s, where Superman is hurt. He's out for the count. He's going, you know what? I will be the protector of Metropolis that I have said I will always be if this stupid Kryptonian didn't show up. Right. And then he puts on the suit, and in some cases, he's doing it as like either an homage to Superman, or in some cases, he's doing it as an FU to Superman, basically saying, like, I never needed you to protect the city. I'm smarter than you. I just needed this suit to do it. And that's the only time I love it. I think his arrogance knows no bounds at that point, where he's like, nope, I don't need you. I'm going to take care of the city.
Right. Yeah. So shall we jump to For the Man Who Has Everything here at the just under the 2 hour mark? Make it to the last. The last
I will
story
tell you,
on the list.
This is one of my favorite Superman stories probably out there. This is for not just this version, but also the animated version they created that echoes it. There's slight changes between the two. But man, Alan Moore is so good, like on so many levels. So let's jump into this.
Yeah. So for the man who has everything, I mean, this is again a quintessential Superman tale, really of any era, certainly of the Bronze Age. At the very end, Superman Annual number 11 from 1985. And yeah, to your point, was adapted in an episode of the Justice League cartoon, right?
Yeah.
And I think the Supergirl TV show, right? Did it take off on that as well?
Yeah, they did for the girl who has everything. Yeah, they did it season 1.
Yeah. So, I mean, Mongol uses the Black Mercy parasite on Superman, right. And it gives him his heart's desire. So in his mind, he's living this whole life on Krypton, while in the real world, Batman, the Jason Todd Robin, and Wonder Woman are trying to free Superman from the effects of the Black Mercy and fight Mongol at the Fortress of Solitude on Superman's birthday. So yeah, it is a standout story.
It's a standout story, and having not read it in probably 10 years at least, and when I did, I think I might have flipped through it again, like, oh, I love this book, and then I just put it aside. There are some really cool, knowing what we know now, moments that you're going, whoa, that's really messed up. Like what he says in that, like what Batman says at Jason Todd kind of moments and other little things throughout it. It's really, really cool. You want me to jump in? How are you?
Yeah. Let me know what you got there.
So right off the bat, like when you look at the storytelling ability of Alan Moore, Carrie Bates and everybody in like Elliot, they're great storytellers, but they're kind of the one trick pony. Like you can tell the formula, how they approach it. The dialogue boxes versus the square descriptor exposition boxes that Alan Moore used are second to none. Like how he sets up atmosphere, tone, setting, character. It's really, really cool. It's a marked difference from anything we see sooner. And if you like this, you're gonna love whatever happened to the Man of Tomorrow. I mean, that's the next thing you should read if you haven't read that yet. Few things that stick out that are kind of cool, random little tidbits. Jason Todd, one woman makes some comment about being cold, and then Jason Todd goes, "You're talking about being cold, wearing an outfit like that?" And then Batman like pauses, he's like, I forget what he says, like, clean thoughts, please, or something like that.
He says, think clean thoughts, chum.
That's what it is. Yeah. And I was like, oh boy. Like, so that was kind of a weird thing. But the thing that stuck out to me is a weird foreshadowing that Batman says to Jason, which I don't know. When was Death of the Family? Do you remember when Jason Todd eats it? And like, when does he die by Joker's hand? Is it late 80s?
I think it's late 80s. I don't know offhand. I think late 80s.
So Batman says something to the effect of, I don't know, Jason makes some comment about seeing something that's hard or rough. And he says, if you make a profession out of that mask, you'll see a lot worse. And I was like, ooh, like if he has any idea what's coming, like how he's going to go because he's true to being Robin, that was rough to read after not seeing it and not thinking about that.
Yeah, I did clock that as well. And like I said before, I mean, this is certainly not the only instance in the Bronze Age, but among the stories we read, one of the only where, you see the interaction with other, and in this case, the pillars of the DC universe of Batman
Trinity.
and Wonder Woman.
Yeah.
So that was cool. And I mean, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow is one of my all-time favorite Superman stories. And the only reason I didn't include it here is that, we did I think a pretty full discussion of it in the How the Arrowverse Failed, the Clark Kent of Smallville episode, when we were talking about final Superman stories. So for anyone who really wants to hear about that, we did talk about it in that other episode. But yeah, I mean, this Alan Moore story is great. I mean, it's interesting to see, this idea of like what Superman really wants. And in this case, it's presented as this life on Krypton, which doesn't seem all that ideal in a lot of ways. No. I mean, there's this tension with his father who, is part of this, like this sort of Rao movement that's all about promoting the ways of old Krypton, which, and again, I know I say this in a lot of episodes, but it's, eerie to see the parallels to what's happening today in a lot of respects. Yeah. That's what stood out there.
That was the first thing, like, as much as I love the Krypton concept of who Superman is, I guess knowing the story and the point of the Black Mercy, like why they wouldn't have gone him living in Smallville or being married to Lois, having a kid with Lois. They'd show it was a very interesting take, but I guess if Alan is looking at the breadth of the Bronze Age, Smallville is not a big part of it.
Right.
Like, there really isn't a Smallville past Jonathan Martha Kent. We don't see that until the reboot in 1987, where Smallville becomes something more ingrained in the Superman mythos. So I guess it makes sense. I think you and I would both love to see that more, but it makes sense for the time. I love the little seeds that you see, like did you catch the Batman when he has the Black Mercy on him? Like, he's married to Kathy Kane?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, so is that Kate Kane? Is that who we're talking about? Like the Batwoman that we know of as today? I was really confused by that. I didn't know that character in the 80s. I didn't know she existed back then. Fort Roz came up. Did you catch Fort Roz Plaza was one of the
Oh, right. Yeah.
And I'm like, wait, I'm doing a deep dive going like, wait, when did Fort Roz exist? And that was apparently in 1981 that existed in the Krypton Chronicles. They did a miniseries, and I was like, oh my gosh. And that was a big Supergirl story arc about what Fort Roz was. So I love seeing all these little like old school things about Superman's history coming to play in his happiest place on Earth, which was kind of weird.
Yeah, you and I are on the same page, because that was, I guess, probably my biggest takeaway from this. It's like, would that life on Krypton, even putting aside the clear tensions that existed in this world, even putting that aside, just the basic idea of his ideal life is one on a Krypton that never exploded. Is that his heart's fondest desire?
Right.
Again, yes, certainly not the Superman that I grew up reading, but yeah, to your point, maybe this pre-crisis version, maybe that would. I mean, at a bare minimum, I do think it's fair to say there's at least a part of Superman for whom this would be ideal. I mean, so I think there's at least an aspect of the character where this would be the wish fulfillment. But yeah, I mean, it would have been interesting to see, like you said, the Smallville version. What was funny though, and this was kind of a cool byproduct of doing all of this reading that I've been doing. The woman he's married to, Lila, there was that whole Return to Krypton issue in the Silver Age where he meets her and they fall in love and they're going to get married and all that. So as much as this was probably again, one of less than a handful of Bronze Age stories I had read before, when I did read it previously, the Lila of it all didn't really there was no connection for me there. So now I got to read it in the context of the Return to Krypton story from the Silver Age. That was cool. I did like that.
Well, okay, so I was trying to think about this. So when Alan Moore wrote this story, he's probably 35, I think, at this point, maybe. He's pretty young in his career. He's not he's established, but he's not older. So what I was trying to think about, I think in the Silver Age podcast, you brought up Dan Jurgens and how, his influences were certain ages. So let's take any writer that we care about or think about and go 20 years to 25 years earlier. Okay. So if Alan Moore is writing this in, what was this, buddy? 1985. All right. Mm-hmm. So that means when he may have been reading Superman or knows of Superman, that's 1960.
Yeah.
So it very well may be like the way you're talking about in the Silver Age podcast. We got Alan Moore, who he knows of Superman. His dream is all these Silver Age Kryptonians that showed up that I remember you guys were talking about, like, where did all these people come from? My goodness. Like everybody named Al and Vaughn and, and so I guess it's one of those, you write what you know, or you write what you want to pay tribute to. So that's where I come from, is thinking that Alan Moore has no knowledge of what Smallville is or why he'd be wedded to Kansas. He's wedded to Krypton. So that was the only thing that I didn't personally like, but I had to like try to convince myself as to why I should like it. I guess, does that make sense?
That does, and I agree with you, and I think that does make I think that makes perfect sense. The other thing about the story that really did strike a chord, and we'll add this to the growing list of things that I feel, you know, more strongly about now as a dad. But it's like when Kal-El realizes that his son and his family, that they're not real, and you know, he's being pulled apart, you know, pulled away from the son that he, you know, has come to know and love in this, you know, fake world. That packed a punch. That was, and such that once, you know, Superman comes to in the fortress and he just unloads on Mongol, it's like you feel that anger and that frustration and that loss. It was a really strong story.
Bruce Timm and his whole crew do such an incredible adaptation. That Justice League Unlimited episode, I hurt when at the end of that episode, when that scene happens and then Superman loses it, and he just, I'm afraid he's going to tear Mongol's head clean off. But it's pretty intense. A question I had for you. So two things that I thought were like really cool, kind of disturbing, but I also had a question. The first is Mongol's place of contentment. So when Mongol's got the Black Mercy attached to him, his joy and his what he wants to live in is killing everyone. Like, he has torn off Superman's head. It's on a pike. He's walking around like it's like a stick of victory. He's destroying Earth. He's destroying other things, and he's content. To me, that was like, wow, that's dark. And like, that is Alan Moore, like, through and through. Like, you look at whether it be his Swamp Thing, his Watchmen, that kind of stuff. Like, wow, that he knows how to go both ends of the spectrum pretty well.
Yeah, no, definitely. That felt very, and it felt very in keeping with that character. I mean, I you know, when you go to that epilogue page, it's like, yeah, that tracks with what Mongol would like.
Mongol's pretty new to the DC universe at this point too. So I think they introduced him in the mid to late 70s, but he wasn't the War World Mongol that we know at this point. He doesn't get into that point until like 82 or 83. This is like the second or third time we've seen him. We know he's a bad guy. He's pretty big. He's monstrous. I love in the comic, you see even how they draw him. Like, he is a half a body bigger than Batman, Wonder Woman. Like, he just grabs her head like he's gonna just snap it off. It's pretty frightening, actually. I've got to hold on. I got to show you this. This is out of control. Okay, let me see if I can get it out here. And I'm sure when we do a podcast on collecting, look at the size of this Mongol figure. He is literally the size of my head. So, like,
now what line is that from?
This is actually from the Infinite Crisis DC Direct line. So if you are a fan of this character, he's hard to find, but he's a beast. And like, he's markedly bigger than any figure you will ever own. So yeah, I thought I would share. It matched really well to what you see in the comics. So I love that.
Yeah, no, and for anyone who, you know, if you're just listening, it's like, yeah, that was the size of Bernie's head. It's quite a large figure. You know, you mentioned the animated adaptation. I did not rewatch it, but I remember it fairly well. The thing that, one of the things that I really liked about it, and I think, you know, this kind of satisfies what you and I were talking about like the Smallville of it all. In that version, he's not married to, I don't know what name they give her, but it's the voice of Lois, but with red hair. And I liked it because it's like, again, you know, certain versions of the story do play with the Lois versus Lana of it. Others, you know, in more modern times, he's not really torn between them. But I thought that was actually a really nice touch because that incorporates Krypton, Smallville, and Metropolis. And I think that does more accurately represent the heart's desire of the version of the character that I. But even this Bronze Age version, I do think something along those lines, something that weaves in these three main pieces of his life. I think that does really track well. So I love that with the cartoon.
Yeah, two things. It's really odd that if you go back and rewatch it, do you have HBO Max? Can you go
Yes.
rewatch
Yeah.
them?
Yep.
So go rewatch it. Robin's not in it.
Right.
They've removed. And now that I'm thinking about it, what's so confusing about, I don't know whether they're worried that it's going to go full Super Friends, but at the time, Robin's never in any Justice League or Justice League Unlimited cartoons. So they've removed a substantial amount of Batman lore when they don't include him in anything. I kind of like how he saves the day in this.
Yeah.
I think that's a big, big thing. Like the Trinity can't do it, but this kid can. Like he puts the gloves on, he tears Black Mercy off and throws it at Mongol. I think it's great. I mean, I really enjoy it. So here's my question that I think you are smarter than me in this, and I'm hoping you will figure out how to explain this to me. What is the deal when Wonder Woman gives the present to him at the end that I gave you this Bottle City replica?
Yeah.
He speeds off to like a storage shelf and comes back. I couldn't figure out what the reference is, what that's supposed to be. Does he have something already? I don't know.
So I could be wrong, and if anyone has a different interpretation or a definitive answer, please feel free to let us know. But
Yeah.
I was staring at those panels myself, and I was like, "What is supposed to be happening here?"
Mm-hmm.
My takeaway, my best guess is that he already has a replica of it, and he was putting it in the closet, and so that now the
Oh,
space is empty. And because he
yeah,
even says like, "Oh, like I always wanted one," but it's like, well, he clearly already had one. That I
right.
think was what the takeaway was supposed to be. It wasn't entirely clear to me, but that's what I think was going on there.
Yeah, it threw me off. So I guess that's a good explanation because that's one of those Alan Moore's going like, hey, he's Superman, but he's kind of like us. Like we every now and then you get a gift you already have. So like he's the only. Unfortunately, he's got the super speed. We don't have to go like oh, and he runs to the closet, comes back, and then she doesn't feel so bad.
Yeah.
Trying to think if there's anything else that I really noticed about this issue. The Superman and Wonder Woman kiss was kind of weird. Um,
I know. I think
but
she's
yeah,
which is it Wonder Woman who says like, why don't we do more of that? And he says because it would be pretty predictable or obvious or something like that. Or I might be
something
flipping them, but
weird like
yeah.
yeah, like and I was like, it was so quick, and I was like, oh, okay, that's kind of weird. Trying to think what else I wrote down here. I loved seeing Alan Moore did a great job of describing and showing us parts of the fortress.
Mm-hmm.
Like little sidebars of it, rooms, like the animals and zoos and the weird like moving like puddles that were alive apparently and that kind of stuff. um yeah, okay, so Mongol, the last thing about Mongol that I wrote down that I noticed is Mongol is he from every standpoint should always be Superman. Like he is formidable. Like he could kill Superman. I don't want to say I feel bad for Mongol, but he never can seal the deal. He can never finish. Like if something happens that he just won't get there, and I mean he gets so upset every time.
Well, yeah, that is interesting, right? Because like with most of the villains, they're outmatched, right? Like they're punching above their weight, or But like, yeah, Mongol is one of those characters where it's like in theory he could, but yeah,
Oh yeah,
he'll never pull it off. Yeah, I mean, again, when I think of Mongol, of course, bringing us back to my beginnings here, it's like I always go back to the Reign of the Superman storyline and the destruction
yeah,
of Coast City. I mean, that was my introduction to
oh
Mongol,
yeah.
and it was definitely a formative one. Yeah, I mean that stood out a lot, and we'll be talking about that when we get to Death of Superman.
You should reread. I guess that's what's considered in the Copper Age. So the Copper Age is really like 1986 to probably right around Death of Superman. So like 94, 95. And then we're officially in what's called the modern age. So for those that actually is a thing that exists.
Right.
So there's an annual, I think it's number 3 or 4. So maybe it's 91. But there's a really awesome War World Superman story where he's kind of on his exile and he ends up, and I don't know if how familiar you are with the exile and why and I'm sure you're going to address that soon too as we get into the John Byrne era. But he ends up on Warworld and he's getting the crap kicked out of him and trying to help those people on Warworld just like he did on Earth. So that's a really fun story to check out.
Yeah, we'll get there. It's funny because this whole run of episodes, these 3 episodes on Golden, Silver, and Bronze, and then most of that upcoming run of episodes I mentioned of Byrne forward, it really all starts with Death of Superman, because I knew that within the first year of this podcast, I'm like, all right, I got to hit Death of Superman. It's my entry point. It's a big storyline. I got to do it.
Yeah.
But I was like, well, how can I read it and experience it in a different way? Right. And it was my first story. So I read it, that was where I started. I didn't have the backstory. Yeah. So I thought to myself, well, I would probably get more out of it if I had the preceding year's worth of Superman stories. So then I was like, okay, we'll start with Byrne and we'll move forward. But then I thought, well, I would probably get more out of the Byrne era if I had a better sense of pre-crisis Superman. And that's really why we ended up here. And I'm so glad we did it this way. And even before this, we did the couple of episodes on the origin evolution.
Mm-hmm.
And
I love that. Oh.
This, I'm glad. And this has just been so fascinating. And again, from Golden to Silver to Bronze, the 90+% of the stories that I've read for these episodes have been new to me, despite being a Superman fan, my whole life. And, to be able to finally experience these stories, to see the inspirations for a lot of the stuff that I read in subsequent stories or in adaptations, to have the conversations that I've had with you and Rich and Mike. I mean, this really, and Jeremy for one of the Origins episodes, I mean, this just has been just so terrific. I've enjoyed it immensely. Yeah. And it's all building. I mean, we get to our weekly run of it's going to be a weekly run of episodes in September and early October, where we'll get into the Byrne, post-Byrne, and Death of Superman time. I think just for myself as a reader and a fan, I'll get a lot more out of it than I would have just rereading Death of Superman in a vacuum.
So we're at the 2.5 hour mark, and this is going to be the tidbit that if you listen to the entire podcast of this episode, you'd be like, ooh, I learned something really new. So check this out. So many people don't know that Alan Moore revealed that originally Wonder Woman was not supposed to be part of this story. It was actually supposed to be Supergirl. So he wanted to write Batman and Supergirl and Robin, but DC caught wind, sat him down and said, hey, listen, this is going to be an issue because we're going to kind of be offing her pretty soon in the Crisis. We don't want her in this story. Why don't you do Wonder Woman instead? So Julie Schwartz basically sat him down and said, she's going to be really focused on Crisis. We don't want to confuse the waters. So let's use Wonder Woman instead. So all in all, it didn't really matter. I don't know why it was an issue because this story literally gets erased, if you think about it, by the Crisis. But little tidbit, Alan didn't want Wonder Woman. He wanted Supergirl to be fighting this fight. So
I didn't know that. So thank you for sharing that. That is interesting. Yeah. I mean, again, I don't think it would have changed the story profoundly. I don't know. I kind of see it both ways, right? Because on the one hand, having Supergirl there, ties it more into the Superman mythology. And right. I mean, it does make sense, right? If you're looking at, it's Superman's birthday and it's an annual issue. And it's like, well, of course he regularly teams up with Batman and Supergirl's a firm part of his world. So that makes sense. At the same time, and I think it lent itself really well, especially in the cartoon, to use Wonder Woman because now it's the 3 pillars plus Robin of the DC universe. So yeah, I don't know. I think it works well either way.
It is interesting, and I think you touched on this in Silver Age. It is probably the last instance we're going to see Batman give a rat's about buying a gift for Superman. It is the last time you're ever going to see, Batman, all this year he talked to a horticultural expert to find a rose that now names it after Krypton. I'm like, there's no way post-crisis Batman is looking for a present for Superman for Christmas.
Yes, once again, that stood out. Well, listen, yes, we are coming up on the 2.5 hour mark. I want to thank our audience for sticking with us. However many segments you broke this up into. But this, again, this entire run has been just fascinating. And I want to thank you for being part of this, for making your Digging for Kryptonite debut and bringing all of your insight and enthusiasm and notes to this. This was really great. Is there anything else about Bronze Age Superman that you want to say in closing?
No, I think it's great for, if you're a Superman fan, don't feel bad if you don't know a lot about the Bronze Age. I think it's important a little bit. There's so much that we're blessed on with the internet that we can check out a little bit of gold and silver and bronze. And to be honest, that's all you really need to know. You don't need to do the deep dives that we're doing. It's fun to talk about. It's fun to learn about it like we did. But start where you are right now and just dig in where you can. But I love talking about this age and any age. So thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you. And I guess the last thing I'll say, I look at these three ages, and bronze to me does feel the least clearly defined compared to the other two. But that being said, though, there are certainly clear markers of Bronze Age stories. So, so there is that. But at the same time, you look at golden and you look at silver, and I do feel that there's a little bit more that that identifies those eras, really specifically and clearly and immediately. And you don't quite have that here. But again, there are those certain hallmarks. And like I said earlier, I mean, I really do see this as a bit of a bridge. And I appreciate, again, like I said with Silver Age, right? There were stories that I didn't necessarily love the reading of it, but I appreciate what it added to the mythology. Here, it wasn't so much adding to the mythology, but really deepening the character and the types of stories that you can tell with Superman and taking a harder look at who he is, what he thinks, what he feels. And I feel like the Bronze Age really did a lot of work during those 15 years or so. And of course, we'll see that continue into the modern era. So I'm very appreciative of the Bronze Age, certain stories that I really did enjoy. And like I said at the top, this might be an era that there might be some back issue hunt in the future for me. We'll see. But again, thank you very much, Bernie. I really appreciate this. Thank you to our audience. We'll be back in 2 weeks with another look at Zack Snyder's Justice League. And you might be saying, but Anthony, you did 2.5 hours on the Snyder Cut. What more do you have to say? There's always more to say. And this time, my buddy Justin DeVoe, who was on for the Final Night episode, he's going to come back. And we're going to be looking specifically at the black and white version, the Justice is Gray edition of the Snyder Cut. So there's always more to talk about. That's coming up. And again, that run of episodes from Post-Crisis to Death, that's coming up in September. So there's really a lot of fun Superman talk in store. I hope you will tune in and enjoy. And until then, remember, it's about what you do. It's about action. Digging for Kryptonite is a Flat Squirrel production. Art by Greg Schiegel, music by Basic Printer. Join the conversation by becoming part of the Flat Squirrel Podcast Network Facebook group. Follow Digging for Kryptonite on Instagram and Twitter, and visit flatsquirrelproductions.com to explore more of my film and podcast projects.